Hi, my name is Carey and I'm the co-host of Tech Vets. It's a free podcast that you can listen to. It's all about the trials and tribulations of running a computer repair business, including tales from the trenches and things that we've had to do to fix computers. I think if you like my videos, I think you're going to like my podcast. It's completely for free, and you can listen to it by going to www.tech-vets.com. Be sure to check it out. It won't cost you anything. This is a video I'm so looking forward to doing. I love building computers. In fact, I've probably built somewhere between 10,000 and 20,000 computers. No exaggeration. In the early 90s, I worked for a company where we easily built 100 computers a day, me and a group of other people. And however many of those were mine, times 5 days a week, times however many years I was there. I worked at Intel, I built computers there. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, instead of people who are telling you how to build a computer who are doing it from ways they've read about, or ways that their friends have told them, or ways they've, perhaps watched YouTube videos like this, what I'm telling you comes from my own personal experience. And I have to tell you, the techniques that I'll use and I'll explain to you about everything from static to proper part handling comes from all the years of experience I have doing it. It doesn't come from, it doesn't strictly come from just books, but it's a mixture of knowledge from professional education, personal education regarding books like Scott Mueller's series of books, Upgrading and Repairing PCs. Which, by the way, I think if you ever really want to be a serious technician, you should have a copy of Scott Mueller's Upgrading and Repairing PCs. He's a great guy. He and I got together. I drove out to Illinois to meet him. I think we have that picture here somewhere. Can we throw that picture up? That's me and Scott together. He's a really cool guy. And anyway, he's been writing this book. There's the book right there. And it gets upgraded about every year with the latest information on hardware, PC hardware. Lots of good detailed information. If you're serious about being a technician, this is your Bible, and you should have a copy of this book. And this book is well over 1,000 pages, and even has a DVD in it to cover information from older hardware that had to be removed from the book when it was updated. Definitely worth checking out. Now, I absolutely, as I mentioned, I love building computers. And that's what this video series is going to be about. And I say series because there's been a lot of criticisms from people who didn't like a 2-hour video. There's a lot of criticisms from people who didn't like me showing how to take things out of the box. They said, really, if you don't know how to take things out of a box, should you be building a computer? Well, my earlier videos were there to show how easy it was for anybody to do it and assume that they didn't know what to expect, what comes in the box and how it's packed in the box. So I won't do that in this video, so for those of you who are happy about that, you can cheer now. Okay, that's been done. We'll do something a little different this time. This time we'll cut the video into 2 parts. The first part is going to explain every part that I'm using and why that part was selected. The focus is getting the best bang for your buck. And the folks over at Maximum PC Magazine have tested thousands of hardware components over the years and have a reputation for being unbiased and they don't lean towards one sponsor or advertiser. They just tell it like it is. And they've done thousands of hours of lab research and bench testing and benchmarks to come up with this information. So it's not like, some guy says, oh, well, this is faster. These people actually know for a fact that it's faster. They've actually done the testing, they spent the hours of research, and we're going to just go ahead and borrow from them the hard work that they've done to justify these parts. Now, these aren't the only parts you can buy. You can certainly go about building your own system if you think you can do it better. I say do it better. If you've got more money to spend more money. This system is all about spending the least amount of money for the most amount of computer, okay? The best value for the dollar. If you buy a really cheap computer, you're just going to end up having to upgrade it in a few months' time. If you buy a really expensive computer, you're going to find out, if you buy the best of the best, you're going to find out that it's worth half of what you paid for it in 6 months. So trying to find that balance is really important, and it's not easy. It's not just as easy as saying, well, this runs faster with this game. Well, maybe if that's the only game you play, then in your case that might be right. But in general, speaking of overall all games, for general use, for the general population, these are the best value for the dollar today. This is November 1st, 2012. So the parts that are selected and their prices are all reflective of November 2012. So if you're watching this video a year from now, if you're watching it in 2013 or 2014, or heck, even if you're watching it in 6 months from now, these parts will not be the best bang for the buck anymore. The hardware changes that quickly. However, the building process is pretty much going to be the same. This computer will not be a giveaway. A lot of people wanted to know if this computer would be a giveaway. I've paid $1,200 out of my own money, even though if I want a game, I go get on my Xbox 360. I don't use my PC for gaming, but you guys wanted to see this. So I spent this money for you guys, and what I think I'll do with it, I'll do one or two, I'll tell you what I'll do, well, one or two things. Someone can buy it from me, and I won't make any money on it. You could pay exactly what I paid for it, which I think was $1,184. If someone pays me exactly what I paid for it, I'll pay the $100 out of my own pocket to ship it to you. If you live, here's a condition, you've got to live in the United States. If you live in Arizona, which is where I'm at, I will deliver the computer to you and I can support it if you have any problems. The problem if I ship it to you is if it gets damaged in shipping, or if you have a problem with it 3 months down the road, I may be thousands of miles away, there's really nothing I can do to help you. You'll have to deal with the manufacturer directly, just as you would if you were to buy the parts in this video yourself and make this computer yourself. The support falls onto you, and you have to contact the manufacturers directly. So that may be one advantage to buying something like a Dell or an HP is all the parts you go back to Dell or HP for support. On the other hand, if you've ever called Dell or HP for support, you may not find there's much support there at all to begin with, and it can be a very frustrating experience. So sometimes dealing with the manufacturers directly when you buy your own parts is actually easier. But again, that's a personal thing. It's up to you to decide what's right for you. There's nothing like the satisfaction of building your own computer, and you'll be able to fix it a lot better too, because you'll understand how it goes together. You'll understand how to take it apart. So. And then when you're playing your games knowing it was your rig that you built yourself, there's just a great sense of pride in that. And it's so easy, anybody can do it, and that's what this video is about. So again, we're breaking it into two parts. This is part one. What we're going to do is we'll go to the video I made yesterday. You'll see like a little pumpkin over here, because yesterday was Halloween. And I show you all the parts that are going to be used in this build, how much they cost, and why they were justified as the best value for the dollar according to Maximum PC Magazine, current issue that just came out a few days ago. In fact, right now you can go out and get that issue of Maximum PC Magazine. Later on, they'll make the magazine available for free as a PDF on their website in a couple of months. And when they do that, I'll be sure to add it as a link. There's video notes at the bottom of this video. Please check them out. At the end of this video, there will be a link for part two. So part two is actually the build. Okay, so part one explains the parts. Part two goes through the build process. If you're interested and you want to buy the computer from me, just leave a comment and I'll respond to you. Just all the comments have to have approval, so no one's going to see your comment if I don't approve it. So if you put your email address in your comment, I don't know if YouTube will let you do that, but if you just put something in your comment, we'll figure out how to get together and chat. Some people want to email me and ask me questions about their, what about this part? What about that part? How do I get this out of that? Guys, I get like 500 emails literally like that every day. And usually I just ignore them, or they go right to the spam folder. I never even see them. I don't have the time to answer your questions that are specific about your build, or that are specific about what parts are compatible with what parts, because it means you have to do research. I did a video series called Quick Tips, and it shows you where to go for tech support for free, where there are volunteers who are there to help you. I'll put that link in the video notes below this video. Please use it. There's people who want to help you. It's not that I don't want to, there's just one of me, and there's thousands of you guys. And And a lot of the information I just simply won't know. I mean, if you say, well, this processor worked with this motherboard, this video card, I gotta go look all that information up on the internet. It's not like I'm this genius. Well, I am. It's not like I'm this genius who just goes, you know, like a robot. Oh yeah, da, 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 da. Like this stuff changes every 3 months. All right, it's always changing, and they're just not easy questions to answer without doing some research. And there are people who hang out, you know, on support forums, who stay right up to date with all this latest gaming hardware, who can answer your question a lot more intelligently than I can, and who have the time to do it, which I don't. So I would appreciate if you would respect that. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear that you built a computer. I'd love to hear what your experience was, you know, if you had a problem or if it worked out for you, what you thought of the video, if you thought there were ways it can be improved. I'd like to see those, you know, in the comments. That's what they're for. They're for comments. They're not for questions. So anyway, there's a place for that, and I appreciate it. And be sure to check out the video notes. There'll also be video notes on part 2 of the video, and hopefully this keeps everybody happy, because the people who want to go right to the build can jump right to part 2, and the people who want to know all about the parts, the details about the parts and why they were selected, can continue on with this video. So here we go with part 1, the parts that were selected and why. Enjoy. The CPU we're going to use is the Intel Core i5-3570K. It's 3.4 gigahertz, and it's a quad core. There's no sense getting any more than 4 cores, since if you're a gamer, there's not going to be really any games that use more than 4 cores. You're just wasting your money. Same with hyper-threading. So unless you're doing encoding or 3D rendering, in that case you should pay for hyper-threading or move up to 6 cores. But for the sweet spot today, for most people, and especially gamers, it remains 4 cores. And that Core i5-3570K is unlocked. So that means we can overclock it if we want to. Now, why not AMD? Well, AMD just doesn't make competitive processors for the price anymore. They used to. In fact, they used to smack Intel down all the time. But for the last couple of years, AMD's processors have been lagging behind Intel. So if we were going to make an entry-level, cheapest of the cheap gaming PCs, then maybe we'd look at AMD. But for the best bang for the buck, AMD's not in the picture. In fact, at this point, AMD's fastest 8-core processor can barely outbox Intel's last generation quad-core, without hyper-threading enabled, mind you. For the video card, the best bang for the buck is the GeForce GTX 660. Now, this is a close call, all right? There's a lot of video cards to choose from, but here's why the 660 and not the 660 Ti. Thing is, at about $230, this GPU is faster than the slightly more expensive, or same price depending on where you shop, AMD HD 7850 by a respectable margin. And it even beats the pricier $280 Radeon 7870 in some tests, making it the fastest GPU today under $250 by a wide margin. So why not spend $70 more and get the Ti? Well, based on benchmarks, you don't get the return on investment. Basically, the 660 Ti costs you about 25% more than the 660, but it only offers an average of 15% in performance improvement in most of the tests. When you tabulate price per frames per second, the GTX 660 also has the advantage over the GTX 660 Ti in the majority of tests that were run, making it the value leader. As icing on the cake, you only need one 6-pin power connector instead of the 2 that bigger cards require, so you're also going to save money on your power supply as well. Motherboard is going to be a Gigabyte Z77X-UP4TH. Coming directly from Maximum PC Magazine, they find the sweet spot for a cost-conscious power user to be right about $190. Now sure, you can get a Micro ATX Z77 board for under $100, but it's usually stripped down to the barest of essentials, with thermals on the VRMs as an afterthought. It's like getting a new car with roll-up windows and manual locks. So we think by stepping up to about $190, you get such worthwhile amenities as a Virtue hybrid graphics support, multi-GPU support for both Crossfire X and SLI, and ports galore.
Some good examples of bang for the buck boards besides this board are ASUS's P8Z77-V, and of course this board here, the Gigabyte's Z77X-UP4TH. Both are feature rich yet don't break the $200 mark. Now this build's going to include a solid state drive and a regular hard drive. So your boot drive is going to be the solid state drive, and the best bang for the buck right now today is the Crucial M4 256 gig drive. It's got 400 megabyte per second reads and 250 megabyte per second writes, and it's under $200. Right now the sweet spot for solid state drives is a 6 gigabit per second SATA SSD and a capacity near 256 gigs, or 240 gigs for a SandForce controller based drive. And why 256? Because 256 is big enough to store your operating system, programs, and several games, and many modern controllers are optimized for that capacity. Like SandForce SF2281 controllers, for example, have 16 lanes, and a 240 gig drive has 16 NAND modules. Best of all, thanks to this year's massive price drops, SSD prices are under $1 per gigabyte. You can get a 256 gig Samsung 830 series, which is one of Maximum PC's favorite SSDs, for under $230. But which SSD offers the best value? It's got to be Crucial's M4 SSD, which is a favorite of system builders because of its relatively good performance and its low price. Now, it's not the fastest 6 gigabit SATA SSD, but it's plenty fast by any standard, and it's attractively priced. Basically, it's $180, and that gets you a drive with sustained reads over 400 megabytes per second, sustained writes over 250 megabytes per second, and good random read and write performance as well. Now for $20 more, you can get the OCZ Vertex 4 with reads and writes in the 440 megabyte range and higher random IOPS. And for $50 more than the M4, you can get the Samsung 830 series drive with 500 megabytes plus sequential reads, 400 megabyte per second writes, but lower random IOPS, which is fine unless you're running a really active database server. So the specific drive you'll get depends on the pricing, and as is the case with most components, you can get a great drive for a little more than the cost of a very good drive. But right now, we think the Crucial M4 is the sweet spot to beat. Now on the surface, it might seem like a hybrid drive itself is a sweet spot, giving you SSD speeds in your most common tasks with the capacity of a standard hard drive. And while that's true, there are two basic types of hybrid drives. A true hybrid, like the Seagate Momentive XT, consists of a hard drive with onboard NAND cache and an algorithm that mirrors the most frequently accessed sectors of the hard drive to the cache. The current Momentive XT is a 2.5-inch drive that tops out at 750 gigs of storage with 8 gigs of cache, and is a good choice for laptop owners who don't mind the $60 price premium over a standard 750 gig drive. The other type of hybrid, which is a roll your own, is more accessible for desktop owners. Intel chipsets since the Z68 have shipped with smart response technology to allow users to add a cache drive, and many SSD vendors now ship lower capacity drives with Dataplex caching software. Now this is a good option for people who can't afford an SSD large enough to be its own boot drive, or for those who don't want the trouble of a reinstall. But there are limitations. SRT can only use cache drives under 64 gigs, and the Dataplex software that ships with most cache SSDs won't work if the system drive has a GPT partition scheme or is over 2.2 terabytes. Either type of hybrid will speed up the feel of Windows. It'll boot faster and frequently accessed programs will launch much faster, but you won't get the massive speed boost when copying files, and tasks that you don't often perform won't feel the benefit at all. So it's not quite the best of either world, but it's better than just rolling mechanical. Now, speaking of mechanical drives, the best mechanical drive you can get for the buck right now is Seagate's Barracuda 3 terabyte drive. It's weird to say this, but the sweet spot hard drive is the same as the best of the best hard drive. The 3 terabyte Seagate Barracuda is the best combination of price, performance, and capacity, whether you're using it as your only drive or as the backup for a boot SSD. Its sequential read and write speeds over 150 megabytes per second make it the fastest 7200 RPM drive Maximum PC has ever tested. And with its price of $140, means its per gigabyte cost is only 4.6 cents, making it the best value on the market right now. By contrast, 2 terabyte green drives, which spin around 5900 RPM, are around $120 from Western Digital and Seagate right now. But why pay more per gigabyte for slower storage? Cost per gigabyte goes way up as size goes down, especially for any drive under 1 terabyte. If your budget can't stretch to $140 and you don't have an SSD, you'll want to prioritize performance over capacity. Get a 2 terabyte Barracuda and make sure it's one of the 2 platter 7200 RPM ones with the 64 meg cache. At $100, that's 5 cents per gig. 2 terabyte Western Digital Caviar black drives, on the other hand, are over $200 right now, today. If you do have an SSD and you only have, say, 85 or 90 bucks, you can pick up a 1.5 terabyte Barracuda Green. It's one of the few drives over 1 terabyte that are under $100 right now, although we hope that changes as the industry recovers. Now, whether Seagate is engaged in a price war or it's just fared better in the Thailand floods of last year, its drive prices are unbeatable right now, and the 3 terabyte Barracuda is by far the most screaming deal in hard drives today. For the case, I'm going with the NZXT Phantom 410. There are people who say the case doesn't matter, that the sweet spot for cases is as cheap as you could possibly get, and these people are bad and they should feel bad. The sweet spot for cases is right around $100. At $100, you can get a great mid-tower or full-tower case with solid build quality, plenty of fans or fan mounting options, front panel USB 3.0, toolless drive bays, and a nice paint job. Now below that, you're going to sacrifice build quality or looks, and above that you start getting fancy with water cooling mounts, support for giant motherboards, or a half dozen fans or premium materials, but $100 is going to get you a case with good air cooling that you can be proud of. Now, Maximum PC's favorite cases at that $100 price range are the Fractal Design Define R4 and the NZXT Phantom 410. The Define R4 is the more flexible of the two. It's more of a silent PC by design, with its acoustic foam on the inside and the side panels, and its unused fan holes covered with sound dampening material until removed to add fans. Now, the Phantom 410 looks stunning, especially in red or gray, and it comes with much more fan support and more fans flat out. Now, these aren't the only cases at $100 and below that are worthy of consideration, but they're two of Maximum PC Magazine's favorite mid-towers, and they both happen to be around the $100 sweet spot. The RAM we're using in this build is Patriot Viper. It's an 8 gig DDR3 kit at $1,600. For Maximum PC's experience and based on today's RAM prices and capacities, Maximum PC recommends 8 gigs of DDR3 1600. Everyone knows that 2 gig is not enough RAM today, and while 4 gig is okay, why stop there when 8 gig isn't really that much more? Right now you can pick up 8 gig of DDR3 1600 for about $40, while 4 gig is only $10 less. Should you buy more RAM than that? Well, only you can answer that question. If your applications are RAM hogs or you tend to multitask, additional RAM can't hurt. There's one more pesky problem though. How many memory channels do you really need? Is it worth paying the extra surcharge for a quad channel setup, or is dual channel enough? To find out, Maximum PC took their trusty LGA 2011 based 0-point setup and they set it to bone stock clock speed and tested it with 8 gigs of DDR 1333 in quad channel, dual channel, and well, single channel using various benchmarks. Now, some of the benchmarks are GPU limited and others are CPU limited, to make a point that memory bandwidth won't make a difference in many of your applications. Stepping from quad to dual doesn't hurt much, but going to single will definitely take the bite out of performance, although not as much as you would expect. In fact, upping the memory speed from DDR3 1333 to DDR3 1866 actually erased the difference in the apps that seem to like bandwidth the most, encoding. So why does memory bandwidth make nary a difference in the vast majority of apps? Thank the huge caches in today's CPUs. The only time you really want to go all out on memory bandwidth is when you're intending to game with integrated graphics. The Cooler Master Hyper 212 Evo is the best cooler for the coin Maximum PC's ever tested. You know, there are many unsolved mysteries in life, such as who built the pyramids and where do socks go during laundry, and how is it possible that the Cooler Master Hyper 212 Evo only costs $35. It just doesn't make any sense. This simple cooling device has bested the majority of the skyscraper coolers that Maximum PC has tested since they tested it back in January of 2012, and yet it costs less than almost every single one of its competitors, making it a rare gem in the world of PC components. Now, what about water cooling? Well, we're not going to go there, simply because even though the all-in-one designs have radically simplified the installation and maintenance of cooling loops, their price-to-performance ratio is still not as good as what's available from a solid air cooler. In fact, in some cases, the bigger air coolers actually perform better than liquid coolers, while costing less, so the sweet spot for now is definitely on dry land. And last but not least, the power supply, or in this case, the Corsair CX600. Maximum PC's normal advice for an enthusiast constructing a system is to think long term. Overbuild, because you don't know what parts your machine will end up with, and consider how hard your power supply is going to work on those sweltering days of summer. And if we were going to make a recommendation for someone using those guidelines, we'd say buy the Corsair TX750 V2 or the Thermaltake Smart 730. Now they're both about $100. They give you a nice long 5-year warranty and offer 4 6+2 connectors for future beefy GPU support. But remember, this video is about bang for the buck, and with today's sweet spot GPUs offering pretty fantastic power envelopes, the folks at Maximum PC Magazine were quite surprised by stepping down in power supply units to Corsair's $70 CX600 V2, which provides 600 watts and 2 6+2 GPU power connectors. This power supply has plenty of power to run a single GPU machine, which is what we're building. It'll do that with no problem, and even SLI if you keep the system properly cooled. But be aware, if you plan to vary from the sweet spot GPU, then the TX750 V2 is the recommended power supply you should be using. So here's our parts. You'll notice there's no keyboard, there's no mouse, there's no monitor, and there's no operating system. We're assuming you already have those things, and all these parts added up together came out to just under $1,200, and it's going to be the best performance of a gaming system that you can get for the money. So what are you waiting for? You ready to get started? Let's get building. All right, here we go. Bam! That's what I'm talking about. That's our case. The NZXT Phantom 410. Now I bet there's a lot of you guys who saw my sneak peek video who saw the box it came in that shows a white computer. You thought this was going to be white, didn't you? Well, guess what, guys? They don't put different color cases in different color boxes. The box, all the cases come in are the same. And the box just has a thing written on the top that tells you what color the case is on the inside, okay? It's not white. This is gun metal. Why do you think I picked that color? Because it's awesome. All right, anyway, got a little case window. It's a gaming system, so that's okay. If it was a business system, you know I wouldn't put a window on it. It's a beautiful case. Look at this thing. We flip this bad boy up. Look at this. We got our headphone and microphone jack, USB 2, USB 3. This looks like a fan controller here to increase, decrease the fan speed. You got your power button, reset button, all right up on the front. Case door, which is irrelevant because we're not using any optical drive or nothing. How are you going to put your operating system on it? I'll show you how later. What do you think? Is that bad or what? I really like it. I might like it so much I might not want to sell it. This is really cool. And it comes apart real easy. We have 2 screws right here. You might need to get a screwdriver depending on how tight they are to get these screws out. We're going to set these screws aside. These will be the last screws we basically need to put in because when we're done we'll put this panel back on. This panel, if you're looking at the computer from the back, it's the right side panel. Just pull that off. We need to put this away because we don't want it to fall down and we don't want to scratch the nice plexiglass there. So let me go put this away. Be right back. While I was gone, I came back with the power supply because that'll be the first and easiest part to put in. Right down here is where your power supply is going to go on this case. Now I'm not a big fan of putting a power supply on the bottom, and I'll tell you why. Heat rises. And well, this case has plenty of fans. As you can see, there's a fan up here, there's a fan here. We have lots of room for cabling back behind the motherboard tray. Lots of room for drives. This is probably a box full of parts. Yeah, there's our box full of parts that
Got these nice removable hard drive trays. And actually on this case we're going to need to take the other panel off too. I'm just seeing a lot of stuff has to get access from the other side. But just so you see what comes with the case, got some instructions there. There's all the screws you're going to need right there. And there's some zip ties. That's pretty cool. They give you some zip ties. All right, let's get rid of that. Anyway, what I was saying was I don't like power supplies on the bottom because you think about your CPU is going to be here in the middle. Your hard drive is going to be over here, or possibly down here. And the heat from the power supply is going to rise up. And it's going to rise up over the video card. Your video card is going to be right in here. And it's going to rise up in the CPU. It's just going to get hotter and hotter right in the middle. So if the power supply were on top, as that heat rises, the power supply has a fan to blow it out. So ideally, the airflow comes in the bottom, and it kind of moves up like through the middle like this on an angle, and then goes out the top through the power supply on most computer cases. Now, that's not to say that this case is going to run hot. Quite the opposite. This case was engineered specifically for the airflow to move in a way that the situation that I've just said won't cause a problem. Now, how the engineers figure this out, I don't know, but I assure you they do. And it's just a different design. Ultimately, it doesn't make much of a difference. It's a bit of an old school approach that I have about having a power supply on top. It's not going to hurt to have power supply on the bottom on a case that's been designed for that. But it's just an observation on my part. And normally, like I said, on a regular business build, there are other reasons not to have the power supply down on the bottom. On a business build, you really want it to be really easy to work on, and the power supply on the bottom just adds to the cable clutter down towards the bottom when you're already going to have your motherboard umbilicals and everything down there. Anyway, it is what it is. Some people really like it down here. There is the style of it, you know, the way it looks, the aesthetics of it definitely looks cool, that's for sure. To put a power supply in, I got my electric screwdriver and my knife. I need a knife to open the box. I'm going to go ahead and pull the other side panel off of this case. Flip this around this way so you can see what I'm doing. There's two screws. One screw right there. One screw right there. If you're wondering about the screwdriver, this is covered in my screwdrivers video, which I'll put a link to in the video notes below. If you haven't seen it yet, you might want to check it out. This is a screwdriver I used to use way back in the early 90s. They still make it today. That's how good it is. It's exactly the same as it was. They haven't changed a thing on it. I guess when you make it right the first time, you don't have to go back and redesign it. Alright, I got this other panel off. Let me go put this other panel away. Again, I don't want it to fall down somewhere and get scratched up. It's a nice, pretty panel. Alright, let's go ahead and get some things out of the way here, right? Let's just set all this aside, put all the screws together, put all this off to the side. Get a nice open area to work on. Right now we're not dealing with anything where we got to worry about static electricity, so we're not even going to talk about that right now. Just going to get this case opened up, or let's get this power supply opened up. Okay, here's what you get in the box with your power supply. There's your warranty guide, there's your instructions, there's your power cable, there's more zip ties, and there's some screws. That's good, we'll keep that. There's some silica gel. No, you're not supposed to eat this. Don't eat this. Do not eat this. No. All right. And then there's our power supply, and the rest is an empty box. All right. So that's what you get. Then you got your bubble wrap here. Everything's got to be wrapped up. Right. When you look at the power supply, you see it's got 4 holes for screws and one is offset. Let's get you a nice close-up here. You'll see there's a place for a screw in each corner, except right here. This one is offset. Now, on many cases, that means this power supply will only go in one way. However, on this case, we spin it around. There's an offset screw here and an offset screw here. That means we can put this power supply in either way. Doesn't mean we should. There is actually a proper way this power supply, a proper direction rather, that this power supply should go in.
Now instinctively, I would think that the fan that's on the bottom, you'd want this fan to blow down and out of the case, down through here. But the instructions that came with this case specifically show the power supply going in with the fan facing up. So if you look at this diagram right here, it shows that they want the fan on the bottom of the power supply facing up. Actually, I just noticed something on this power supply. There's a little sticker here. It's covered up. And you might get parts that are covered in this plastic, and some people like to keep the plastic on, but the plastic's not really meant to be left on. It's just there for protection and shipping. And you can peel this off, and it'll look a lot better when you do. See how much better that looks? And then that you can just throw away. Okay, so let's show you how to get this thing installed. Turn the case around so you can see. We want the fan, as I've already explained and justified, in the up position on this case. These are your umbilicals for the fans and LEDs and switches. We're just going to push those out of the way for right now. And we're just going to line that up. Just kind of set it in there until it looks about right. Like so. And then we'll turn it around this way, and you want to make sure all the holes are going to line up about like that. We're going to take the screws that came with this power supply. You don't have to use these screws, but might as well. And we just want to get the screws started. We don't want to tighten them down. So by leaving these screws loose, I was able to push down on this power supply and push it this way to get the screws started. Now that they're all in, now we can tighten them down. This screwdriver has a clutch on it that's going to keep me from over tightening. You'll hear that clutch kick in. Just like that, our power supply is in. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. One of the first things I think you're going to notice that makes this video different from my previous videos, there's just going to be a lot of transitions and a little bit less detail than my previous videos. My previous videos, I wanted as few cuts as possible to show the viewer every step involved and that there wasn't any magic or secrets done in between cuts, okay? But to speed this video along, you're going to see a lot of transitions, and we'll just try it and see how it works. I hope you guys will like it. It'll make for the video to be much tighter, much shorter. So that said, the next part of this build is to get the motherboard ready. So we're going to need the motherboard, we're going to need the RAM, we're going to need the CPU, and we need the cooler. All right, those are the 4 parts we need to get this ready. Now, this is where static gets involved. This is an anti-static strap. This is the way it works. You're supposed to put this on your wrist. Like this. And then you're supposed to take this little metal alligator clip on the other end and put it to something metal, preferably not painted. Some bare metal would be better. But whatever you put this alligator clip to needs to be metal, and it needs to not be plugged in. All right, you don't want to have an earth ground. We've been through this before. Earth grounds are bad. All you're trying to do is put yourself on the same electrical level as all the devices. Earth grounds can electrify and kill you if power were to be turned on, if you were to get electrocuted. Now, my opinion is, in my experiences, this is not necessary. Anti-static straps, if you follow the way I'm going to build the system and you follow the steps that I do, you won't need this. However, they're not that expensive, and if you'll feel more comfortable wearing one, then you just go right ahead and you wear one, okay? That's fine. Now, static problems aren't like what they used to be. You know, back in the day, motherboards were this big and had 100 different components on them. But through the miracle of technology, a lot of those components have all been put down into a chip now that's, super tiny. So a motherboard today has much fewer components on it. So that means it's less static sensitive than, let's say, motherboard of a few years ago or 10 years ago. Also, the parts, when they're mounted into the circuit board, are less susceptible to static than the raw parts at the factory that are sitting in bins. They're much more susceptible to static. Now, that's not to say you don't have to worry about static, but it is to say that the rules of static and anti-static have changed a bit, and in that how the technology has changed. There's fewer parts to static shock, and static isn't this mystery that it once was, this sort of invisible death of parts, that come creeping down and ruin your parts. So
You'll see I'm working in the kitchen. I work on a tile floor. Do not build your computer on carpet. If every room in your house is carpeted, go outside. You'd be better off standing on grass or dirt or gravel or cement than standing on carpet. That's rule number one. Rule number two, try not to, if you're one of these people that's always itching, try to avoid itching, all right, because that builds static. Keep the case handy and keep touching the case at all times. This will keep grounding you out. This case is not plugged in, it's just a metal case, all right? And all you have to do is touch it. Just make a habit out of touching it every so often, and that'll make sure it discharges any static that's built up. You'll see me do this, and you'll also see that I handle the parts in a way that, even if I did have static on me, I'm not touching any of the components. I'm going to handle all of the components, or handle all of the parts by the edges. All right, so that also eliminates any possibility of static discharge. So, disclaimers out of the way. Let's get started. We'll take our motherboard out of the box. What comes with the motherboard? Instructions. In this case, lots of instructions. This is your SLI connector if you want to hook two video cards together. We're not going to do that, so you want to keep this, so if you want to do that in the future, you'll have it. SATA cables for the hard drive. More SATA cables for the hard drive. This is your I/O shield. This is real easy to install. Actually, we'll get this out of the way in just a minute. Then there's like this little cardboard. You lift that up. And inside, the last piece left is the motherboard. Now, let's close this up. And let's talk a little bit about this anti-static bag. Here is our motherboard. You'll see the way I'm handling it. You see I'm holding it by the edges, okay? That's pretty important. It may not always be possible to handle this board by the edges, but when it is possible, that's how you should handle it. Now, let's get to the fun part, shall we? A lot of you are under the false belief that you should not put the motherboard on this anti-static bag. A lot of you are under the false belief that the outside of the bag is somehow made out of a different material than the inside of the bag. A lot of you don't understand how an anti-static bag works. The only way an anti-static bag works is for something to be inside of the bag. That's the only way a static bag works, okay? It creates something called a Faraday cage. Once you remove the item from the bag, it's not in the cage anymore. This bag is non-conductive material. You can put a multimeter on this, and I have, and it will read infinite resistance. Put the same multimeter on your finger, and you'll get like 500 ohms of resistance off your finger. Your fingers are more conductive than this bag is, all right? Now, there's this old thing going around, everybody says, don't put the bag, don't put on the bag. Look at my anti-static Mythbuster video, and you'll see that I turn a motherboard on the anti-static bag, and if this bag were conductive, the whole board would have smoked. So, there's always a ton of comments about me putting this on the anti-static bag. And there's a reason why I put on the anti-static bag. I don't want to scratch my counter, okay? Now, I have nothing to gain or lose if you believe me or you don't believe me. I have nothing to gain or lose if you put your motherboard on the anti-static bag or you don't. All I'm interested in is giving you the facts and trying to squash all the old, outdated information that people are constantly perpetuating. And you can check it yourself. You can verify what I'm saying. Just get a multimeter and check it. Let's not confuse anti-static with conductivity, all right? You don't want to put this on a conductive surface. In other words, we don't want to put this on a metal tray. We don't want to put it on anything that can conduct electricity. This bag won't conduct electricity, and it protects my countertop. I've been building computers. How many times, have I said this? For a long time. Never once has this ever caused any problem, or I wouldn't be doing it, and I wouldn't be recommending it. Now, if you're uncomfortable with it, that's fine. Another way is you can just put the motherboard box as your little table, and that'll work just as well to protect the tabletop from being scratched, because the bottom of this board has a lot of very sharp points. I don't want to touch them, because that's how you can static shock the components, is by touching these points down here. That's also a nice way to cut yourself, because they are really sharp and they will scratch whatever surface you put it on until you get it mounted properly into the case. All right, so that said, I'm doing it my way, all right, which as far as I'm concerned is the right way, and I'm using the bag, and I'm going to use the box too. So I just get a little upset about people who have no actual education in electronics leaving comments telling me I'm wrong. And as you can tell, I get a little passionate about that. I get a little emotional about it. And don't be dissuaded by those people. And you don't even have to believe me. Test it yourself. All right? Let's not confuse anti-static with conductivity. And I can't stress that enough. The only way this board stays anti-static is inside this bag. Once you take that motherboard out of the bag, it's open to any static that's in the air. I live in the desert. It's got a very dry air, very low humidity, so it's more prone to having static in the air. All right, I'm more prone to carrying a charge. So again, just keep touching the case, touch the metal of the case, not the plastic, but the metal. That'll keep grounding you out. It'll keep you on the same electrical level as your atmosphere, the room that you're in. It's very important. Now, let me get off my soapbox and let's continue with the build. As I mentioned, we've got this I/O shield. This I/O shield comes with every motherboard, and on the back of our case, we've got a hole cut out right here. This is a universal standardized size, and every I/O shield will fit in every case. Some fit tighter than others depending on the tolerances of the case manufacturer. So let's get this out of the bag. I'll show you how this goes in. Now this I/O shield, now that I've taken it out of the bag, is actually much nicer than most. It's got a nice bit of foam and foil for grounding the ports out, which is great. Just shows the quality that was put into this particular motherboard. This is just going to snap into place right here in the back. See if I can show you that. All we're going to do is we're just going to pop that in. Now you can see it can go in this way, or it can go in this way. Now, how do you know which way it goes? Real easy. You see these slots here? You know that these slots are located below the audio. So if I put this in this way, it's going to be upside down. If you put it in upside down, you just pop it out, turn it around, okay? So it's not like it's any big deal. But like I said, in some of these cases, they're going to fit tighter than others. You do want a snug fit. You may be hearing it click into place as I push it in. And there it is. Again, so far, real easy, right? Piece of cake. And every motherboard comes with an I/O shield. If you bought a motherboard that doesn't come with one, then I would suggest you send that motherboard back and get one that does. One of the first things we can do for the board is seat the CPU. So let's go ahead and get our CPU out of the box here. Now, this part of the box is actually going to be needed if you ever have to do any warranty. So I never cut this side of the box, the side with the label. The other side of the box has a little piece of tape on it. And we're just going to cut that just like that. And when we open this up, you'll see we've got our stock cooling fan that we're not going to use on this build. And then right inside of here, this is our CPU. I'm just going to set it down. All right, hopefully this will give you a better view of what we're going to do here. This is a cover that's protecting these pins. And these pins are very delicate, and it's very important that you do not touch the pins underneath this plastic, okay? So the way we're going to remove this is you just push down on this lever and pull it out, and then lift it up, and you'll see that whole piece comes up. Then there's a little edge right here where it says remove right here. Just stick your finger under there and just lift up gently. And you want to put this piece away in case you ever need to send this motherboard in for warranty. The manufacturer is going to require that you put this piece back on to cover those pins back up.
so they don't get damaged in shipping. If you fail to do that, they won't honor their warranty. So just so you know, I'll put that away. Here's our CPU. We're going to take it out of its case. Again, I'm going to handle it by the edges only. See, I'm handling by the edges. Okay, that's what the bottom looks like. That's what the top looks like. You'll see there are two grooves. That tells you which way the CPU goes in. It's only going to go in one way. And there are two notches. And again, we don't want to touch any of this. And those little grooves are going to line up with the notches, and it's going to sit just like that. And then we can go ahead and lay this down gently and then close this lever back down. It's going to have a lot of resistance to it, okay? That's normal. You can see if I let it go, it's going to spring up. So we're going to push it down and then slide that piece back under, just like that. And that's our CPU. Now before we go any further, we need to install our cooling fan because it needs to mount under the board. And so it has to be done while the board is out of the case. So let's get this opened up. All right, so what comes in the bag with this heatsink? Let's empty it out onto the table. Let's see what we got. All right, first things first, this is our thermal compound. We're going to need that, so we'll set that aside. This is the top of, this is going to actually hold the heatsink in place. And it's going to sandwich together with this piece. All right, I'll show you how that works here in just a minute. So we need those two pieces for sure. So we'll set those pieces aside. There's some parts we're not going to need. For example, this is a little bag of hold downs for an Intel LGA 2011 socket. We're not running an LGA 2011 socket, so we don't need this, but we might one day. So let's go ahead and hold on to that. We'll put it back in the bag. And you'll also see there's these little plastic pieces here. And they might look familiar to you because they're used right here. And what they're for is you can actually add another fan onto this heatsink if you want to. We're not going to do that. To do that, you need these two plastic pieces. There are these four little black screws, which are right here. That's what holds the plastic pieces onto the fan. And then there are these little sticky rubber spacers. So we don't need any of this today. We might add a second fan at some point in the future, so let's go ahead and just put those back in the bag for right now since we don't need them. All right, and then we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 standoffs right there that we're going to need. And those standoffs are going to be held in place with these nuts. And they even give you a free socket that on the other end has a Phillips base to it, so that you don't have to get a wrench or it already comes with the socket in the kit. Okay, so these are the parts we don't need, this bag of parts. These are all extra parts for maybe one day in the future, so we can get rid of that for right now. Put that away somewhere safe. And then these are the parts we are going to need to mount this heatsink and fan. I'll show you just how easy this is. And if you look closely on this motherboard, you'll see there are 4 holes around the CPU. Now that's normally where your OEM fan would just sit right on there and then it would click right into place. In fact, the motherboard could even be mounted into the case and you could still do that. For this heatsink, the motherboard has to be out of the case because we need to put this back plate behind it. And this back plate's going to go on in this direction. Right? I don't know if you can see if I can get you a good angle of that. You'll see there's a non-conductive material here. That's going to be the part that's actually going to face out. And this is going to be the part that goes towards, the all-metal part goes towards the motherboard. And you'll see the parts that actually touch the motherboard, the corners here, all have the non-conductive material on them. Now, in a perfect world, you would take these 4 hold downs and you would put them right into these holes like this. Then you would hold your motherboard up on an angle and then you would put this on. But if I do that, you won't be able to see what I'm doing. And by the way, it's hard to see depth with the video, but I'm not touching any of the tops of these components. It might look like I was touching the top of the CPU. I'm not touching the top of the CPU right now. My hand is over it. We don't want to get finger oils on the CPU, otherwise we'll need to clean it with some alcohol. So anyway, in order to show you what I'm doing, I've got to do this kind of a weird way. I'm going to take these out, and I'm just going to leave... I'm just going to start with one, it doesn't matter, and I'm going to hold it in place with my finger, and I'm going to flip the board upside down so that you can see what I'm doing. Now we're going to take this back plane, like I said, this is the side that goes towards the motherboard, okay, just like that, and fit it over where that screw is. Take one of the nuts that came with the kit and get it started so it can hold it in place. Okay, I'm going to grab another one of these. I'm going to go to an opposite corner here, so we'll go right there. And this may be a little bit tight when you're doing it, and if it is, you just don't force it, just rotate the screw a little bit. And then we're going to grab another nut, and we're just going to get it started so it can hold it in place for me. Just like that. Grab another one. Put that one in. Put a nut on it, hold it in place. And then we just have our final one, which we're going to put right there. And that one's being a little bit tight, so we're just going to kind of wiggle it around a little bit. Again, don't force anything. And then got our final nut right there, and then we'll get that started. If you're wondering how I'm supporting the board on this angle, if I flip it over very carefully, you'll see all I was doing was holding it just by that piece, all by itself, not touching any other part of the board. Let's flip it back over. Now that we've got all these started, we can tighten them down. So we're going to use the included socket that came with the kit. We're not going to use the mechanical screwdriver. You want to use just a good old-fashioned, regular old manual screwdriver. Place the socket over one of the nuts, whatever corner you want to start with, and just snug it down, okay? Then go to the opposite corner and snug that one down, and then do the remaining two. And at this point, we just want them all snug. Okay? Now that they're snug, we want to tighten them down, but don't over tighten them. You could crack your motherboard. But we want to make sure that they're not going to go anywhere, that they're not going to loosen up. It's going to hold that heavy heat sink, right? So we want to make sure these are good and tight. But don't use so much muscle on them that you crack your board. Alright? I guess what I can say is if you crack your board, you put it on too tight. Remember, we're not sealing this from water or anything like that. We just don't want it to come loose. That's all. So make it tight, but not too tight. Flip the board back over. Again, you see I'm grabbing it by the edges. So now how do we know which direction to put this heatsink on? Should it go this way or this way? Which way should it go? Well, this fan right here is going to blow this direction. All right, that's the direction, the airflow. And we know that this is the back of the motherboard because this is where all your keyboard and video and USB ports are. And we know that the case we're going to use has an exhaust fan that's going to be blowing air out that way. So what we'd want to do is keep that into consideration and put this heatsink on this way. All right, let's see if you can see that. So what's going to happen is the air will blow through here, and when it's mounted in the case, there's another fan here in the case that's also blowing air. It'll keep that air moving that way. So that's how we decide the direction, the best direction for the heatsink. Now before we can add this heatsink, there is a little piece of tape on the bottom of it that's keeping the surface clean and free of contamination. Now, we're not going to peel that off just yet. What we're going to do first, let's set this aside, is we're going to put, the first thing we need to do is put thermal compound on our CPU. So we'll take the little tube of thermal compound that came with the cooler, remove the cap, and we'll put a little dollop of it on there like so. Okay, be careful, don't use too much. Now the way I spread this thermal compound is I use a small straight edge screwdriver and I clean it first. So what I've got here is some completely denatured alcohol. If you don't have this, you can use rubbing alcohol and just a simple paper towel. So with that, we'll make sure the tip of the screwdriver is completely clean with the denatured alcohol. And it will air dry on its own very, very quickly. It evaporates on its own very fast. Now we know that that's super clean. And again, we haven't touched the top of the CPU, so that remains completely clean and not contaminated. We want to spread this thermal paste out as thin as we can get it, and we want to cover every single part of the CPU. The CPU is going to get really hot. Actually, Intel CPUs have their own protection built into them now, and they don't get as hot as they used to. Too many people pour this thermal paste on. Some people think it's better to just put a thick dab of thermal compound on it, and then when you put the heatsink on, let it spread naturally. But what you'll find when you take it off, if you take the heatsink off, is that there's parts of your CPU that don't have any thermal compound. All this thermal compound is going to do is cover the little microscopic nooks and crannies that are in the metal that you cannot see with your naked eye to help heat transfer from the CPU to your heatsink. That's all it's doing. So if you put too much of this stuff on, it actually slows the cooling process down. It hinders the heat transfer. So make this as thin as you can possibly make it. You see how I'm spreading this out, how that little dab is going a long way. And I want to cover every bit of surface area on top of the CPU. Now, some people may argue that that's not necessary, and you do it whatever way you want. You know, I'm not gonna make, my life isn't gonna be any better or any worse if you choose to do this some other way. If you want to know how I do it, this is how I do it. And with that done, I can clean my screwdriver again and get that stuff off of there. And as you can see, I barely used any of this thermal compound. There's plenty left in there for probably at least 3 or 4 more jobs. Now, you do not put thermal compound on this side, all right? Or you'll have too much. Only put it on the CPU. Do not put it on your heatsink. Now we're going to remove this little plastic cover that, like I said before, keeps this from being contaminated from dirt. And you only remove that when you're ready to mount it. Okay, so before we can put this heatsink on, one of the things that's going to get in the way is this fan before we can screw these down. So we've got to take the fan off. So the fan comes off real easy. You just pull on this little tab here, pull on this little tab here. The fan's going to come right off. And remember how it comes off, because you're going to want to put it on exactly the same way. So we'll set the fan aside. Now, we can take this piece right here. All right, we're going to open it to the first position. And if you look on the bottom of it, it's got just a little nub that sticks out. And there's a recess. There's a recess right there that's going to fit in, okay? So when we place this inside, we're going to place this inside like this so that recess fits just like it's supposed to. And then we can open that up a little bit more. All right. So nothing's holding that in right now. It's just me holding it together. Okay, now with that in place, remember, I almost put this on the wrong way. So remember, we want to put this on the right direction, okay? We don't want to put it on this way. We want to put it on this way. All right, so you want your heatsink to go on in this direction, and we're going to line up the hole down with the screws that are available here. Now once you've got this in the right position, you want to move this around, the hold down strap, but make sure it doesn't come out of the recess that holds it into place on the bottom of the heatsink, all right? That's going to hold your heatsink in place. So you can kind of open and close this as you need to line it up with the holes. And right now, all we need to do is line one up and tighten it down. We're going to tighten it down with a mechanical screwdriver. We're not going to use an electric screwdriver for this, all right? Make sure you use a mechanical screwdriver. We just need to get one of these lined up, and we just want to get it started. Just like that. Then we're going to go to the opposite corner, and here we can start figuring out where we need to line it up. And as you do that, again, it may come out of its recess. Make sure it stays in that recess in the heatsink so that it holds it in the correct position. So we're just going to go to the opposite corner here, and we're just going to start this screw as well. This does have a bit of spring tension on it, so you may have to kind of push it down a little bit when you're putting the screw in, and that's why you don't want to tighten the screws too much at this point. Now we can go ahead and do the two remaining. So we'll just get that one started, like so, and then we'll get this final one started. Okay, now I can go ahead and tighten it all the way down since I know all 4 screws in. Double check, make sure that the strap is still properly seated correctly, and it is. So we're just going to go ahead and tighten this one all the way down, just like so. We'll go to the opposite corner. I'm going to tighten that one all the way down, just like so. And again, the 2 remaining screws. There's no particular order that you have to do this. I would just do opposite angles, just to make sure you get even tension all the way around. And then finally, you might want to just snug them up make them tight. Don't over tighten them, but make them tight. All right. And that heatsink ain't going anywhere. It still kind of moves a little bit on the processor, but that's normal, that's okay. It's got a nice tight fit to it. Now to put our fan back on, let's see if I can turn this around a little bit. Fan's gonna go on. Remember, the fan is gonna blow this direction, going this way. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna put it on just the way it came off. What you're gonna do is just, if I show you this angle here, put one side on. There's just this little clip and there's a groove. Put one side on and make sure the top of the fan is flush with the top of the heatsink. All right, so once you get that side lined up properly, just like that, and then you can just push forward and it should just snap right into place, just like that. The last step is to take a power cable, and the power cable is going to plug in right down here where it says CPU fan. So right there, you'll see it says CPU fan and system fan. So this one is the CPU fan and the one above it is the system fan. We want the CPU fan. You'll see there's these little grooves on this connector. See those grooves? Make sure the grooves line up with the tab and then push it straight down. Alright, so where are we at on the video now? It looks like to be about 43 minutes. That's not too bad. Considering putting the heatsink on actually added a bit more time. This is the hardest part of the whole build, so if you didn't think putting this heatsink on was that difficult, well then the rest of this is a breeze. The last thing we've got to do is put the memory in, and then the other thing we'll do is we've got a lot of extra wire here off this
power cable going to the CPU fan.
Alright, so what we're going to do on this close-up shot is we're going to wire tie this up. And you know, what can make this a bit easier is if we just go ahead and unplug it here for a moment. And then we can take this cable and just kind of wrap it up like this. And then take a zip tie, put it right on there, get yourself a nice set of wire cutters, cut the end off of that. You'll see there's a little yellow tag on here that says not to throw the heatsink away. It's made out of recyclable materials like aluminum and copper. After you've got that nice and neatly tied up, we can go ahead and put that connector back on. You may not need to take your connector off. It just depends on you and how you decide to do that. As you can see, we still have a little bit of a loop here, and they give us plenty of wire ties, so don't be afraid to go ahead and put as many on there as you need. Like this one here. We'll put another one here. And that'll make that really nice and neat. Just cut the ends off. Now when it comes to installing our RAM, of course the first thing we need to do is get it out of this box. So that's easy enough. Just open the lid, pull the RAM out, and we're going to set it aside for right now. On the motherboard, the RAM's going to go into these sockets. You'll see 2 sockets are gray, 2 sockets are black. If you look very, very closely, written in very small letters on the motherboard, it has the sockets numbered. If you see right here, it says DDR3-4, DDR3-2, DDR3-3, and DDR3-1. Let me zoom the camera out to give you some perspective of where those numbers are located. Okay? Now what that's telling you is that this is DDR4 and this is DDR3, the other black one right here. And that this is DDR2, this gray one up here, and this is DDR1, this other gray one. So they want you to put the memory in pairs for dual channel, which means you're going to use one pair, whether you use the gray pair or you can use the black pair. If you want to use all 4 of the sockets, you can use that and fill them up with all 4 RAM modules. Just make sure all 4 RAM modules are the same. So it doesn't matter if we want to use the black pair or the gray pair, but we're going to use a pair. We don't want one in gray and one in black. Okay, you got that? Now you see these little tabs here? These bend out. See if I can get you a good show of that. We're just going to bend all these out. Every one of them on both sides. Now here's our RAM. We can open it up right here. And we do not want to touch the exposed gold, what they call the gold fingers. We don't want to touch those. Just take one of them out, doesn't matter which one. It can be in there a little bit tight. And you'll see it's got a notch in it right here. And that means that it can only go in one way. If you see there's a notch right there. See how that's got to line up? But think about this before you start putting it in, because if you put the one in closest to you first, it may make putting the second one in further in harder. So put the one furthest away, the one that's going to be hardest to get to. I would put that in first. So since we know this black socket here is going to be the furthest away, if we want to upgrade, it's going to be a pain to get into there and reach that. But it does get awfully close to that fan. So, well, it'll work. And I wouldn't feel comfortable using that socket because of how close this fan is to it. So I'm going to go ahead for that reason, and I'm going to put it into that furthest gray socket, since we are only using 2 sticks. If we were going to use all 4 sticks, you know, we'd have to figure it out. We might be able to, you know, slide the CPU fan back a little bit, or it would be a tight fit, but it'll work. So now what we're going to do is you just put a thumb on each corner. You push one corner down first. You'll hear it click into place. Now I'm going to push down the right corner here, and that clicked into place. That one's done. Back to our package of RAM. We'll take our second module out. Again, careful not to touch the gold part there. This has got a heat shield on it. You can grab this anywhere you want. It's perfectly fine. You don't have to worry about static on this because this is a heat shield that protects the memory. Again, look at where your groove is. The notch. It's got to line up with the groove. It's not going to line up that way, see? It's got to go the same direction as the other one. And we're going to skip the black socket, right? And we're going to slide that right into its track, like so. Thumbs on the corners. Push down either corner first, and the other corner. You will hear it snap into place. And that's it.
All right, now we're ready to put the motherboard into the case, and for that we're going to need just a regular mechanical screwdriver. I don't want you guys to use an electric screwdriver for this part, okay? And then we need the bag that came with the case that contains the screws. Let's go ahead and open that up right now. And let's get everything out of here. Well, we got lots of bags in here.
Now these are called standoffs. As you can see there, these are kind of cool that they're painted black, although you're never going to see them. And they're going to go into the back of the case and line up with the holes on the motherboard. Then they give us a bag of screws like this, and they give us a bag of screws like this. And I'm going to need to kind of test fit them to see which screws actually will fit in there properly to know which set to use. We'll do that before we go any further. So outside of the plastic, you'll see this is the motherboard standoff. It's got a little screw on one end that's going to go into the case. And then this is the screw that we're going to use right here. It's got a, if I can hold this to show you, it's got a coarse thread on it. We just want to test fit that to make sure that these two go together. And they do. So now we know which parts we need to continue. This bag of screws and this bag of standoffs. Now these standoffs are normally 5mm, and I have a wrench for that because I'm a technician and I work on these a lot, but a lot of you guys don't, and you're probably going to want to use pliers. What's nice about the NZXT case is it comes with a little socket for you. Look at this. There's a little socket that fits right in there, and the other side uses a regular Phillips screwdriver. What a nice touch. And it just goes to show what you get when you buy a quality case. So these are our motherboard standoffs. They gave us 9 of them. This is our socket right here. Then with the screws, they actually gave us, these are 9 screws to match the 9 standoffs, and then there's 6 additional to use for other things. Now the little plastic baggie that the standoffs came in is actually labeled, there it is, standoffs. And the little baggie that those screws came in is labeled 6 30-second screws. Alright, so the easiest way to mount your motherboard into your case is to lay the case down. So let's take the case now, and let's just bring it down like this. Your motherboard tray is obviously going to be on the bottom. If you flip it the other way, that's not going to do you any good. Alright, hopefully this shot's going to work. This is actually a pretty hard shot to get, but just wanted to show you that there's a bunch of pre-drilled holes all through the back of the case here. And they have different designations, like that one says M8 and that one says M7. You'll see this one has a series of numbers below it, U5, A5, M4. You don't really need to worry about these designations. More or less on this motherboard we're going to be using most of the ones that have the U designation, so there's like U1, U2, U3, but we're not using all of them, like we're not going to use that one. How do you know which of these screws you're going to use? Well, after you've built a lot of systems, you get used to knowing, you know, where the majority of motherboards that you install have the mounting holes. However, if you're not sure, what you can do is dry fit your motherboard into the case. Let's do that right now. So to dry fit the motherboard, you'll see I'm holding it by its heat sink. It's a place that's safe to hold it. There's little plastic covers. We need to take these little plastic covers off in order to get it to fit through the I/O shield. We can put those back on later. There's also another little one right here. I'm just going to go ahead and take that out. And again, we'll put these all back in after we're done. But what you can do is just dry fit this by very gently setting it down. Before you set it down, make sure you're well grounded here. And just kind of seat it into position. And you'll see the motherboard has these mounting holes. And you want to make sure that the motherboard mounting holes, in this case, there's 9 of them, right? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and across the top 7, 8, 9, which you can't see these ones up here on the top. Maybe if I can hold it up on an angle, you might be able to see it a little better. So kind of get that image in your head of where those holes are in your motherboard. You want to use all of them, all 9, unless there's no place in your case for one. But if there's a place, use it. What you want to be really careful of is you don't want to place a motherboard standoff. If you take this out, you do not want to place a motherboard standoff in a position that isn't going to line up with a hole on the motherboard. It will ground out against the bottom of the board and you'll probably fry your motherboard. So count the number of holes you have. In this case we've got 9, and place 9 motherboard standoffs in their correct positions. Once again, it's a little bit of a difficult angle here, but I'll do my best to kind of show you where these are going. We know we've got to put one up here in this top corner, and I'm just going to put it in finger tight right now in case I get any of them wrong. I know another one's going to go right up here by the top slot, so we're going to put that one in. And I know the next one, we're not going to use this middle hole here. We're going to go to the very last hole on this side towards the last slot cover, and we'll put that one in. And then you'll see there's a whole nother row of screws of holes here, so we're going to line them up. Okay, so where we put one here, we go directly across and put another right there. And we'll work our way up, do the same thing in the middle, again directly across from this one, this hole here. And up on the top, directly across from this one up on top, is this one here. And you'll see these 3 are in a straight line. And then that's a total of 6 so far. We've got 3 left. So we go to the final edge right here, the last screw on the end of the opposite corner. We'll put that in. So now these 3 are all in a straight line. We'll go up to the next hole in the middle so that the middle ones are all in a straight line. And you'll see I'm not using the holes here between them because our motherboard's much bigger than that. And this is our last standoff. Again, we lined it up with the top ones. And we're going to the furthest corner. And these are all now just finger tight. That's all you want right now. In case you've got any in the wrong position, you don't want to tighten them down until you know they're lined up. So we're going to dry fit the motherboard one more time. Again, you see I'm holding it by the heatsink. We're going to dry fit the board. Very gently, move the cables out of the way if you have to. And we're going to put that right in there. And make sure that all the holes in the motherboard line up with those motherboard standoffs. You should be able to see the standoffs through all 9 holes. All right? I can't stress this enough. Again, if your case does not have a place for a standoff, well then you simply don't use that hole in the motherboard, okay? Ideally, your case will have all the right pre-drilled holes to meet the standard for your motherboard. Now at this point, take the board right back out. We verified the position of the standoffs, and so now we can use the socket that came with the case, and we can tighten these down. So again, I'm using a mechanical screwdriver for this. Magnetized is going to be very helpful. Again, you don't want them too tight, and actually this socket is good for that because using the standard number 2 Phillips, it sort of limits how much torque you can put on these. You can strip these out pretty easily, so again, make them tight, but don't over tighten them. Someone had mentioned in the comments about whether or not it might be a good idea to use something like Loctite. You can if you want to. It may make them difficult to get out later if you upgrade. You shouldn't be tightening the motherboard down that tight anyway. Again, the heatsink's got to be tight to the board, but the board does not have to be super tight to the back of the case. All right, now with all those tightened down, we can now put the motherboard in permanently. So for the third and last time, I've got the motherboard here, again, grabbing it by the heatsink, lowering it into position. Again, shove cables out of your way as you need to right now. Just get the cables out of the way. Line up your I/O ports, which are right up here. If I can show that to you. It's going to be hard to see with the fan in the way. But you're going to line that right up with your I/O shield, just like that. And you're going to need to sort of push the motherboard in this direction as you put the screws in, because it's going to have a natural springiness to it to want to put it back this way. That keeps it grounded up against the I/O shield. So it doesn't matter where you want to start, but don't tighten any of the screws down yet. A magnetized screwdriver, highly recommended, will not hurt anything. And again, you want to use a manual screwdriver for this. And we just want to start all 9 screws. There's no rhyme or reason to any order that you put these screws in. Just make sure you put them all in. Now that we've got all 9 screws started, we can go ahead and start tightening them down. It doesn't matter what order you tighten them down at this point, because we're not worried about the motherboard being in there or flexing or anything like that. It's not that tight. And you just want to go ahead and sort of tighten these down to a little more than snug, I guess is the best way I can describe it. If you over tighten them, what'll end up happening is the motherboard standoff, when you go to unscrew it, the motherboard standoff will unscrew with it, and that can make taking the motherboard out later very difficult. But again, these screws are just in position to hold the motherboard in place. The motherboard's really not going to be moving around at all. There may be some slight vibration from the heatsink. So like I say, just a little bit more than snug should be more than enough torque. I just can't stress enough, do not over tighten. Now these little plastic covers we took off, we can put those back on now if we want. Now with our motherboard mounted into the case, we can set the case back up on its feet. Turn it around there and you can get a good look of what that looks like. You can see on the back how they've cut a hole on the back of this here to give room for this mounting piece that we put on. Although it's designed to actually fit with the proper distance of the standoffs. So if your motherboard tray doesn't have a hole here, it'll still be okay. But it's kind of nice that they do give you that hole here for just that reason. It's also nice that they give us a nice recess for running lots of cables back here. Some cases the panel's too tight, and if you run the cables behind, you can get a cable really easily trapped in the panel when you close it, and it'll cut the cable, and that's not good. Anyway, so some of you might be a little concerned when you see how close this heatsink is to the 5 1/4 inch bays right here. Don't worry about that, because if you're going to put anything in these bays, you're going to open up this door and you're going to put it in this direction. You're not going to put it in from inside, you're going to feed it in this way. So that heatsink will not be in your way if you want to put an optical drive or any other device up there in those external bays. Now, I've mentioned before how I like my drive cables to be up on this side of the case so that I only have to remove one panel to do any work to it. What they did on this case is actually pretty smart. The drives are actually designed to go with cabling in the back where you can't see it. But you still don't have to take off the back panel if you want to change a drive. What they did is really clever. If you just remove this one thumb screw right here, and you grab this tab and this tab, the whole drive cage slides right out. And there you can go ahead and change your drives and everything without having to take the other panel off. I really like that. I think it's very clever and very well thought out. And again, just goes to show you get what you pay for when you buy a case. You buy a cheap case, you're just not going to have nice features like that. And then to put that back in, real nice and easy, it just slides right back in place. And then you can just put that thumb screw right back on. All right, let's move this over to the side here, because the next thing we have to install are the hard drives. Now, let's go ahead and get the mechanical drive out of the way first, because that one's going to be the easiest. This is the most fragile component of the whole computer, so do handle this delicately. And take it out of the anti-static bag, hold by the edges, okay? Don't touch the circuit board. Now, there's really no right or wrong place you can place this hard drive. So, what I'm going to do just to make it look neat, and since we already have the back panel off, I'm going to go ahead and take this first little adapter out. See, I just squeeze the little ends. And you'll see this is completely toolless. All you have to do is line up these holes on the drive with these little nubs that are sticking out here. So to do that, see if I can get you a good angle here. Just work on putting one side in first, like that, and then just kind of bend the other side with your hand. And you'll feel it snap right into place. And you can make sure that these are fully seated here. You can see that's completely toolless. And then this is ready to go right back into its slot and clicks into place. That easy. So putting the hard drive in is easy, right? So we'll get that out of the way. Now let's get our SSD drive out. Now the solid state drive is going to be much smaller. That's a regular mechanical hard drive is 3.5 inches wide, and most SSDs are really in a laptop format, which is a 2.5 inch wide. So we'll take this out of the bag here and show it to you. There we go. So here's our solid state drive, and you'll see it's much smaller. Now again, it doesn't really matter which of these bays we put it in, but to keep it the cleanest look possible, we're going to go ahead and just put it on the bottom. So we'll squeeze that tray out of there. But you see this tray is too wide, isn't it? However, you will see that there are screw holes in each corner of this drive. Not on this side. These already have screws in them, but on this side. And you'll see this tray also has the holes. So we're going to have to lay this drive down like this and then line those holes up. But these little tabs are going to get in the way. So what you can do is you can push up on that and take it out. See that? Just taking that little piece out. And we're going to do the same thing on this other one. Let me just move the drive out of the way so you can see what I'm doing here. Right here, you're going to take this piece, push it down, and then push it out. And that's just the little piece that holds a regular hard drive in. You might want to put those away in case you want to use this tray for a regular hard drive in the future. Now with those out of the way, we can take our drive with the connector end facing these clips and just place it on top. And we're just going to make sure we can line up the holes and put the screws in. So where do we find the screws for this drive to fit into here? Well, sometimes they come with the drives, but in this case, this drive only came with the drive and nothing else. The case came with this little bag of screws. They're called M3.5 flat. That means the heads are flat, so they fit flush when they're screwed in. I'm sure these are probably the screws we're going to need. So let's go ahead and open this bag up and take 4 of them out. So to verify that I'm right, let's go ahead and dry fit these. We'll just grab one here, and we'll grab our screwdriver. Again, magnetic tip, very helpful. It's going to hold that screw in place for us. And let's just make sure that that's the right size. Yeah, that's it. So, real easy now. All we have to do is take our tray. We want to make sure that this part of the connector faces the part where you're going to squeeze it to take it out. And make sure that the screw holes here are going to line up here. Let's go ahead and just flip it over. And this is going to kind of require two hands, as you use one hand to hold it in place. Again, where a magnetic tip screwdriver really comes in handy. Let's go ahead and get the screw started, but don't tighten it all the way down. And do the same with the other three. And actually, if I go ahead and just bring these down a little bit more, I can let it go. And it'll be okay. And now I can go ahead and put the remaining two in. Just like that. Now let's just go ahead and snug them up. Just a little bit more than snug is all it needs. That doesn't have to be tight at all, okay? So just a little bit more than snug. That's all you need. Just like that. Now with our SSD drive properly mounted into the drive bay adapter, all I have to do is slide it right back in, just like this. And that's it. Our drives are mounted. This is it. This is the last part we have to install, the video card. Let's go ahead and open it up and see what we get. Open the box up this way. There's our instructions and our driver CD. Of course, we don't have a CD, so how are we going to install that? I'll show you later. Just remove that little bit of foam. And here is our video card in the anti-static bag. And then under here is an adapter for converting regular Molex connectors if your power supply doesn't have the 6-pin power connector that this video card requires. That's really nice they throw that in. Although it would be even better if you had the right power supply. Alright, so we don't need that part, so we'll just leave it in the box for now. Let's go ahead and install this. Now installing this video card is actually super easy. Even easier than putting the hard drives in, if you can believe that. Let's just get it out of the anti-static bag. First things first, right? Again, you'll see the way I'm holding it. We certainly don't want to touch any of the circuit board. And you'll see it's got a couple of covers on. It's got a little plastic cover here that we have to take off before we can install it. It's got a plastic cover here. That's where you're gonna, if you're gonna go into SLI, you're gonna have to hook the two cards together. We're not doing that, so that's gonna remain. On the end of the card, we've got the two DVI ports. We've got, what is that? That looks like HDMI right there. And then this other funny looking connector right there, that's the Displayport connector. So we can use any of these to plug into our monitor depending on what your monitor's capabilities are. And if you look real closely, you'll see we've just got that one 6-pin connector right there that we're going to have to run power to, which I'll show you in a minute. But let me show you how easy this is to put in. Alright, so the first thing we can do is lay the case back down again. Now you don't necessarily have to do that, but it does make it a little bit easier. So we're going to lay the case down just like we did when we installed the motherboard. Right, hopefully this will be a good enough angle that you'll be able to see what's going on. The video card's going to go on the topmost PCI-Express 16 slot. If you're only using one video card, you want the big slot here closest to your heatsink. Alright, now we're going to need to remove a couple of these slot covers. Remember, we're dealing with a video card here that's 2 slots wide. See that? So we're going to have to remove 2 of these slot covers. Which 2? Well, if you're not sure, All you have to do is kind of set the video card in close. Don't actually plug it in. Just rest it above that PCI-Express slot, and you can see it's going to fit right here. So these two slot covers have to come out. So we'll just take our handy dandy screwdriver. You'll see I'm actually holding the slot cover in place, otherwise it'll just fall and hit the motherboard. Probably won't hurt anything, but why risk it? Let's go ahead and take out the other one. Again, you'll see the handiness of having the magnetic tip screwdriver. Now before you rush to install your video card, pay close attention that these PCI-Express slots have these little clasps here. See how that moves back and forth? Just like the RAM has, only there's only one on, okay, there's only one. There's not one on each side. There's just one right here. Make sure that this little clasp is in the down position. Now we can install the video card. Now your video card is going to appear to go in upside down, and it does go in upside down. Your fans are actually going to face the bottom of the case. Line it up with that topmost PCI-Express 16 slot, which is right there. And then when you seat it, you'll see I put a thumb on each side, very similar to how we put the RAM in. And we just gently will place it in. You just heard it click, you heard that clasp close and lock in. And now we can go ahead and put the two screws back in that we took out from before to secure it. Now these screws do not have to be super tight. I would just tighten them a little bit more than snug. That's about all you need right there. And that's all there is to it. Do you have to be in every video I make? Really? Alright, yeah, everybody loves you. I told you that was going to be easy, right? Let's go ahead and set our case back up right here. And now all we have to do is hook the power connectors up and hook our front umbilicals up, which is the power switch, the power LED, the reset switch, the front port USBs. A lot of people are intimidated by this part, the wiring. But actually, if you just take it one wire at a time, which is how I'm going to show it, it's really not that difficult. And because this case has all the proper wiring channels for hiding the wiring, I think a lot of people will appreciate how clean this is going to look once it's all wired up. It won't look as intimidating as some other computers that just appear to have wires running everywhere. Look at that, only an hour and 16 in, and now we're ready to hook up our cables. Okay, now we can start with the power supply. I guess that's a good place to start. Let's hook up the power cables. So let's just bring in the close-up of those power cables, and let's show you how simple this is. Remember, one wire at a time. Now all these power supply cables are bundled up here with a wire tie. Let's go ahead and take that off. Don't use these wire ties in your final assembly. They have metal in them. Just, you can use them for wrapping up cables, like power cables and stuff you're going to put away in a drawer somewhere, but don't leave these in the computer. So now let's take all these cables out. And now's a good time to just get them all straightened out and untangled. These are all our front port umbilicals. They're kind of wrapped up. We'll do those after. So for right now, just let me get that out of the way, because I want to show you this part right down here. We're going to shove all our power supply cables back here. So just take them one at a time and just feed them through to the other side. Now does that look clean or what? Let's go ahead and turn the computer around so you can see the other side. And you'll see we've got all our cables here. And you'll see we've got real easy access to the hard drives. So for the hard drives, you're going to want to grab one of the power cables that has the SATA power connector on it. This is what the SATA power connector looks like. It doesn't matter if you use the one on the end of the cable or the middle of the cable, they all work equally well. Just think about what the wiring is going to look like when you're done. That's how you can decide which connector to use. So I've decided I'm going to use the middle connector because I think it's just going to make it easier to keep the wiring clean. And we can just go ahead and plug that right onto the back of the hard drive here. And it's just going to go on. Just like that. So let's grab another SATA cable, because remember we've got 2 hard drives we have to power. And of course our other hard drive is right up here. And again, just looking at how the cabling is going to fit together, I think in this case, the middle connector is going to be the one I'm going to want to use. And once again, we're just going to put that on right there. Just like that. So our 2 hard drives now have power. Let's go ahead and hook up our motherboard connector. That's the great big one right here, the main motherboard connector. There's going to be actually 2 that go to this board. So that's our big main motherboard connector. And the connector on the other side is right about here. So if I turn this around, I'll show you. So now this right here is our motherboard connector. And you can see it's right next to this little opening for cables right there. So guess where we're going to feed the motherboard cable through. So grab that big motherboard cable connector. You're going to want to go right up here. Now all these cables for your umbilicals, this case manufacturer has done us a great service by going ahead and zip tying these. Leave them zip tied, do not undo this. These are already wired up conveniently for you so you don't have to do it. But you will have to sort of shove them aside so that we can get our cable in there. No big deal, just kind of like that. And then turn the computer back around. You'll see this power connector has a clip on one side, so it only goes in one way, and there's a little notch on the connector itself. So you can only plug it in one way. You may have to wiggle it around a bit, give it a little tug, make sure it's on there. If it pulls right off, you didn't put it on all the way. Sometimes you may even hear it click into place. This one didn't, so I'm just kind of pulling on it just to make sure it's on, and it is. Now this motherboard has another power cable that's got to go onto it right here. You see this power connector right here, it says ATX 12 volt 2x4 right along the side. So that means there is either on this power supply 1 8-pin connector or 2 4-pin connectors, and they should be labeled CPU right on the power supply. So let's turn the computer back around. Now you see of the cables that we have left, you see we don't have very many cables left. 1, 2, 3, 4. So 2 of the cables of the 4 that remain say PCI-E, and you'll see they have a little connector on the side here that they're 6-pin. Or if you use this little connector, it makes it an 8-pin. But these are not the ones we plug into the motherboard. These are the ones that would go to a video card. Okay, the PCI-E ones are PCI-Express, and they're basically saying this goes into a card that plugs into your PCI-Express port, which in our case is our video card. So these aren't the ones we use for the motherboard, but we will be using them next. So set those aside, and you will see that of the remaining cables, there's one here that's 8-pin, which is exactly what we need, and on the side it says CPU. And that's the other one we're going to plug into our motherboard. Now that connector we need to plug it into is up in this corner right up here. So what we can do is just sort of snake these cables around, just feed that right into that access hole right up there in the corner. And right up here in this corner is where it comes out. Once again, you'll see there's a clip on one side. This will only go in one way. So let's go ahead and plug that in. And there's our 8-pin power connector plugged into our motherboard. Again, you might want to give it a little tug, make sure that it's in there good. Like I say, that cable was a bit tight, just barely reached, but there was just enough there to do that. It keeps the cabling nice and clean. Now we just have 3 cables left. Now this is just an additional power cable. If we were putting an optical drive in, we'd use one of these Molex connectors, or if you had a USB hub or something, that would use the little floppy 4-pin, because I doubt you're going to put a floppy in here. But anyway, we're not going to use this, so we'll just wire tie it and keep it out of the way back here. And as I mentioned before, we've got our 2 PCI-Express cables, and our video card only needs one of these, so we just need to leave one and run one to the video card. So we turn the case around, look where the video card is. Okay, so this is where our video card's located, right? And then this is our power connector for the video card right here. So we can either run our cables through this slot here or the one above it, but I think the one above it is already kind of crowded, and I actually think this, running it towards the top of this lower one, will actually be cleaner. So let's go ahead and turn the case around and run that cable through there. So grab one of the cables that says PCI-E. Let's go ahead and feed it through. So once more, we're going to have to move some of these cables out of the way. I want to put it up towards the top. And turn the case around. We're going to pull that through. So on this cable, we are not going to use this additional 2-pin that's for video cards. Some video cards have an 8-pin connector. So we're going to wire tie that down. So all we have is the 6-pin connector. You'll see it's got a clip on one side, and it's only going to go in one way. And we're just going to plug this right into the video card like that. Real easy. Take that 2-pin connector and use a regular nylon zip tie and just tie that down. Just like that. So all our wiring is now done for power. So at this point, we just need to sort of tie these cables up so they stay out of the way. And as you can see, there are little loops right in here on the back of the motherboard tray. So we can grab a regular nylon zip tie. We can bundle these cables up, decide where we're, line it up where you're going to put it. Run your zip tie through like this. Then go ahead and put your cables up there. Go ahead and just tighten that down real tight. Because remember, we don't need these things sticking out, preventing the back panel from closing. So to make the rest of our wiring pretty, we go down to the power cable that goes to the SATA drive. We'll put a wire tie here to keep these 2 ends together. Like that. And then we can take the whole thing, what remains of it, and we can actually just wire tie it right about there. Just like that. So our final drive really doesn't need to be tied down here, but we can tie these 2 ends together with a nylon zip tie here. And you want to make sure when you're doing this that your cables are not going to get in the way of being able to slide these trays out. All right, obviously you'll have to unplug the cables, but at the same time, you'll want to be able to pull those trays out without having to cut any of your zip ties, make sure that none of them get in the way. So that's it as far as running the power supply cables. So now let's hook up our front port umbilicals. So with the computer turned back around, we now have to unwire tie the front port umbilicals here. Again, a reminder, do not use these wire ties in the computer, only use plastic nylon zip ties. So let's go ahead and just pull these down and untangle them. All right. Now this still might look like a lot of cables left to hook up. However, with this particular case, this group of 5 cables is nothing more than power connectors for the fans. So we're just going to set that aside for right now. So your case may or may not have those, or may have a different number of those. Now of these 5 cables that remain, we've got our hard drive LED and power switch cables right here. You've got a USB 2.0 connector there. You've got our front port audio connector here. And this funky blue cable, well, that is a USB 3.0 connector. Let me show you how these go on. It seems a lot of people are intimidated by this front panel connector right here, and this is where you're going to hook up all your front switches, your power switch, reset switch, hard drive LED, power LED, external speaker if you've got one. And on this motherboard, it's actually quite nice that they color-coded everything here. And if you look just below the connector, you'll see it states what everything is. It says HD, that's your hard drive LED. There's a little plus symbol there. It also matches up with the plus symbol here. Then above that it says MSG, that's a message light, which we don't have. Next to it shows RES, that's reset. That means this little connector that's green is your reset. Above that it shows PW, that's this red right up here. That's where your power switch connector is going to go. Right over here, this purplish, that's our power LED, as you see right there. And then the orange up above is for an external speaker if you've got one. The little black pluses that you see are where the positive cables go on the wires. Now your power switch, your reset switch, and your speaker don't really care about polarity. In other words, it doesn't matter if the connector's on upside down. There's no positive or negative on it, really, so it doesn't matter. Now your LEDs are light emitting diodes. That's what LED stands for. They only allow power to flow in one way, so in one direction. So what you have to do is you have to make sure that for your LEDs you get your positive wire on the positive side. So that means on your hard drive LED and your power LED, if you don't have the positive wire on the positive side, your LED is not going to work. So what do you have to do if your LED doesn't work? Make sure you're on the right connector and turn it around. But there's a real easy way to tell which wire is positive and which wire is negative. On some cases, the positive cable will be a different color. And on this case, our HDD LED connector has a little white stripe running along one of the 2 black cables. That indicates that white striped cable is the positive cable. So we've got to turn it upside down like this, and then it just plugs in right there like that. You'll see I'm working on these bottom connectors first, because if we work on the top, then it makes the bottom ones hard to see, because you can see it's hard to see anything below that now that we've plugged it in. The next cable we hook up on this computer is the power LED, and you'll see it splits the wire into a positive and a negative. And the power LED is on this purple right here, so we're going to put the positive one right there on the purple plus, and the negative one on the very last purple connector right there, just like that. The middle one stays empty, as you can see. Why do they do that? The motherboard is accommodating some cases that have a 3-pin power connector or a 2-pin power connector, and this computer case actually splits the power connector, so it'll work on either. Some motherboards have a 2-pin and some motherboards have a 3. And some cases have a 2 and some cases have a 3. So anyway, the case designers decided to split that power connector so it would work on regardless of what type of 2 or 3-pin power LED connector your motherboard came with. The next connector we'll do is the reset switch, which actually goes right down here on this green connector right next to the hard drive LED. Again, no positive or negative matters, so I just put it with the text up so I can read it. And then take our power switch connector, it's going to go right above the reset switch under that red block of 2 pins, just like that. Now if we move the camera to the left, you'll see we've got these connectors that say USB. There's actually 3 of them. And one says F underscore USB 1, and the middle says F underscore USB 2, and on the left, F underscore USB 3. Now that's not saying it's USB version 1 and USB version 2 and USB version 3. No, no, no. This is giving you 3 add-on USB ports. They're all USB 2.0. And that just means there's port 1, port 2, port 3. Doesn't matter which port you hook up to, they're all going to work. We only need one of them to hook up the front port USB connectors on this case. And if you were to buy an internal USB hub or some other internal USB device, including, other USB ports, you have 2 more ports available to you to use. Simply grab the connector that says USB. You will see on the end of it that 1 pin is missing. And on the plug that we're going to plug it into, there's a pin missing. And it may be hard to see on this video, but the pin that's missing is on the upper left of all of these connectors. So it doesn't matter which connector you choose, just make sure that the missing pin goes where there is no pin on the connector, because there's no other way that it'll plug in. I'm going to use the USB port closest to the front of the case to keep the wiring as clean as possible, and we're just going to plug that in like this. And that's our front port USBs hooked up. Next, grab the connector that says HD audio. You will see on the end of it there is a blocked pin. Now if we scroll all the way across to the back of the board, the very last port connector on this board says audio, and below it says F underscore audio. That's for your front audio connectors. And you'll see that missing pin on this port is on the bottom left, so orient the plug appropriately and then just plug it straight in. It only goes in one way, just like that. Our last front port connector we've got to hook up is our USB 3 front port USB connectors. And on this particular motherboard, it doesn't go on the bottom of the board with the rest of the connectors. I'll give you a zoom in here, and you'll see this connector right here, and it says F underscore USB 3.0. That means the front USB 3.0 ports. That's where this plugs in. Now this connector is keyed. It's got a little notch. That means it'll only go in one direction into that plug. Just like that. Alright, so what about the rest of these power cables that remain? Well, you see these 4 here? These have little fan connectors on them, and that's for adding extra fans to this case. Now this case already has 3 fans. It's got 1 in the front, 1 in the back, and 1 up on top. With these 4 power connectors, there are also 4 more fan positions. In other words, 4 more fans can be added if you buy the fans. You can put 1 down here on the bottom. You can put 1 up in front of your hard drives if you have this, hard drive tray filled. You can put a fan here and a fan on the other side to have air blowing through. So there's a place for a fan right here. So 1, 2, 3, and then up on top there's a place for a 4th fan. Now since we're not going to use any of these, we can push all these back to the other side to keep the front of the case, keep the wiring as nice and neat as possible. Okay, you should also take this opportunity to take any slack wire from the front umbilicals that we just hooked up, the power switch and USB and stuff. Go ahead and shove those any slack, just shove it towards the back. So we'll try and keep the case, this side of the case, as clean of wires as possible. So now what about this final power connector? This actually powers the 3 fans that are in the case now, and it's already plugged into the 3 fans that came from the factory that way. So all we have to do is plug this into one of the spare power supply Molex connectors in the back, so we're going to shove this in the back as well. So now with the computer turned back around, we can go ahead and give this Molex connector here power, which we can just use any of these spare ones from the power supply. So for right now, we'll just put it right there. And then the rest of this stuff, all your extra cables, now what you want to do is you want to get your nylon zip ties, and you want to just tie these up nice and neat, try and get them as flush to the case as possible. Like I say, you don't want to pinch any wires when you're going to put your back panel back on. So keep this area, keep all the edges free of wires, and try not to bunch too many wires in one area, or it may prevent that panel from plugging in. So let's go ahead and just wire tie these up. Once you've done that, we just cut the pigtails off here. And we're not quite done yet. I almost forgot to hook up the hard drive data cables, the SATA cables that came with the motherboard. We've got 2 hard drives, we're going to need 2 cables. And these will go on real fast, real easy. Now on this motherboard, our SATA connectors for the hard drives are up here. You'll see there's a white one, and then there are 2 sets of black ones. In fact, let me just move the power cable from the video card out of the way so you can see that a little better. Now there is a little warning down here that says this is SATA port number 5, and this motherboard has something called MSATA. And right up under the CPU there's a socket for an internal solid-state drive to use with the Intel chipset to sort of use a really small solid-state drive to cache a mechanical drive if you couldn't afford a regular solid-state drive. We're not doing that on this build, so we can ignore this warning right now. What we need to pay attention to are these white ports right up here. These are the SATA 6 gigabit per second ports. These are the ones we want to use. The others below are SATA 2 3 gigabit per second. You'll notice one of the SATA cables has a different shape to it on the end, just like an L shape. So set that one aside for right now and grab the SATA cable first that has the 2 same ends that are flat, and go ahead and put one end through to the back of the computer. Go ahead and place the other end of this cable on the very bottom white SATA connector. That'll click right into place. And we're going to take the other end of that, spin this case around. Take the other end that you've passed around the other side and plug it right into your SATA drive, right down there like that. Spin the computer back around. Now taking that SATA connector that has the L on one side, put the L through to the back. And go ahead and put the other end on that topmost white SATA connector, just like that. Now where this little L shape comes in handy is when we plug this into the back of our hard drive, just like this. It's not going to stick out far to prevent our case cover from closing. Of course, now I don't want to forget to plug the power cable back in that I took off to show you from the video card. Make sure we plug that back in. And then finally, we spin it around here. We can grab a couple more wire ties and just clean up the SATA cabling here. Now at this point, the building process is entirely finished except for putting our panels back on. This would be a good time for you to plug yours in to test it to make sure that it tries to boot. I'm confident mine's going to work, so let's go ahead and put the panels on. We're going to start with the panel that has no window. That's going to go on what is your right side if you're facing the computer, where all of our cables are. Now you can see how all these cables are sort of bunched up right here, and that can make putting the back cover on a little bit challenging, and that's why it's important to kind of keep them as shallow as possible, and also be sure to keep these edges clear of cables as much as possible. This cover has these little hooks here. These little hooks are going to go into the little holes here and here, and then it's got this channel track right here, and that's going to connect right onto this edge here. So you want to make sure it's not going to grab any wires and pinch them, because if it does, it could ruin your computer. For this panel, the way these cables are sticking out, you may actually find it easier to set the computer down on its side so you can put weight down on the panel to slide it forward into position, like this. So now with our computer laying flat like this, we can set our panel down right about where it should go, and now we can sort of press down on it. Press down on the whole thing if you can to make sure that all the little hooks went into the holes, and gently slide it forward. And that makes that process a lot easier. Turn it around this way. Before you put your screws back in to secure the panel in place, run your fingers across the edges of the panel and make sure that the panel isn't bowed. If one of the hooks did not go into one of the holes, like in the middle, which are often the toughest ones to get into place when you've got the cables and such pressing back on this panel,
If it's bowed, take it back out and then try it again. It should be completely flush on all three sides before you put your screws in. Or you could permanently bend the case into that position if you secure it that way and leave it like that for a period of time. Now simply take the screws that we removed the panel with, these thumb screws, and put them back in to secure that panel in position. With that done, we can set the computer back up on its feet. Now a couple of other things I can show you about this case before we put it all back together. So if we turn this around, like so, you can actually grab this whole front panel and you can get a grip on it. You can pull that right off. And as you can see, this is where you could add your secondary fan I was telling you about up on the front. This top piece also just pops right off like that, which gives you access if you want to add your fan up here. Tilt this down so you can see it. And there's no screws required to put these on or take these off. Everything just snaps right back into place. Just like that. And next we grab our windowed panel. You'll see there's even a place for another fan here. So there's actually a location for a fifth fan. Anyway, this panel is going to go on real easy because there's nothing pressing out on it like the other panel did. And again, you put it on about 3/4 of the way here and just slide it forward just like that. Make sure to run your fingers along the edges and make sure it's completely smooth and that none of this is bowed out. If it is, that means, as I previously mentioned, that you've missed placing one of the hooks in one of the holes, and simply take the panel off and reseat it again until it's completely flush against the case. And with that done, we can put the final 2 screws in the case. And now, look how pretty that is. Is that nice or what? What's really cool is the fan up on top has a light in it. And so it'll shine down in the dark and kind of light this little area up right here by the window. So very, very slick. Now comes the fun part. Now we get to test fire this baby, see if she works, and throw an operating system on. The first step to testing your computer will be to plug in your keyboard and mouse. Now I'm going to plug in a wireless keyboard and a wireless mouse, and I'm going to use the USB ports all the way at the top. And on some motherboards that actually matters. In some cases I've encountered where the wireless keyboard and mouse will not work for the BIOS unless they are in the topmost USB ports. So I think that varies by motherboard, but I'm going to play it safe. I'm going to use the top ones. I'm going to start by plugging in my wireless dongle for my keyboard, and then my wireless dongle for my mouse. Next, we're going to plug in our monitor. Now this monitor I'm plugging in is a DVI. Remember, we're not using the onboard video. Do not use these. I'm going to keep the plastic covers on those. And it doesn't matter which of the DVI ports on the video card you want to use. I'm going to just take the bottom one since it's easier for me to grab. And then simply plug your monitor in. Now these connectors also have screws. I don't recommend tightening those during the testing process, and if you do want to tighten them down, the only purpose they serve is to keep the connector from being pulled out. So don't tighten them down too much, or you might find that when you go to unscrew them, it takes the nut with it. So remember that any of the port connectors on the back of the computer that have these little screws, tighten them very gently. The very last plug we're going to plug in right now is our power plug. Just plug that in and make sure your power switch on your power supply is flipped to the on position. Because this is our first boot, we don't want to plug in anything unnecessary like speakers or scanners or printers. Just the bare minimum at this point. Now we get to the part I like to call the smoke test. That's where we turn it on and see if it smokes. Of course, I say that jokingly. I'm sure it's going to work just fine. But what I want to let you know is, depending on what motherboard you have, it may take longer or shorter times to have anything appear on your monitor. So a general rule that I like to use is, if you turn the computer on and you see all the lights and the fans are spinning and nothing happens on the monitor for about 10 or 15 seconds, you've done something wrong. Go ahead and shut it off and start diagnosing. I don't know how long this motherboard will take to start up, but I can guarantee we'll see something on the screen before 10 seconds is up, if I did it right. So let's hit our power switch up here. Let's see what happens. Lights are on, fans are spinning. That's a good sign. And let's see if I can see the reflection of the monitor. Nothing yet. Oh, there it is. That's our UEFI BIOS. And now it tells us that there's no bootable device. That's great. That means now it's time to install our operating system. How are we going to install Windows 7 on this computer that has no optical drive? Now, I know there's been a lot of speculation out there. A lot of people have been suggesting that I would use a USB flash drive. Well, you know what? There's a great utility from Microsoft that will convert your Windows 7 disk, your DVD, to USB. Actually, the utility doesn't convert the disk to USB. It converts an ISO image, which you first have to make, which I think Microsoft dropped the ball there. They should do everything for you. But ideally, you have an ISO image and then you copy it to your USB drive, and it's a free utility from Microsoft. It also works on Windows 8, even though they haven't changed the title. But we're not going to do that. And the reason we're not going to do that is, what if this is the only computer you have? You see, in order to convert this disk to USB flash, I would have to have another computer to read the disk and convert it, or to get online to download the utility from Microsoft. And that's all well and good if you have another computer. Installing from flash is much, much faster than installing from the disk. But what I want to do instead is make this real easy. The internal optical drive that we did not put in, if you remember, there's just no internal optical drive here. But that doesn't mean we can't use an external optical drive. This is a USB external CD DVD reader writer, and it costs about the same as an internal optical drive. The difference is that on the rare occasion when you need it, you can just you plug it in when you need it and unplug it when you don't. If you have 10 computers, you don't need to buy 10 optical drives. Just buy this one USB drive, plug it in, and use it when you need to use it. Save some money. So that said, we're going to go ahead and plug this in up here on the top. And they give you a kind of a short cord with all these USB-based drives, whether it's a USB-based hard drive, like a laptop one that runs off USB power, or in this case, this optical drive also runs off USB power. And you get a relatively short USB cable. All manufacturers do that because the longer the cable, the more resistance it has and the power starts dropping. So if you go with a longer cable, it may not provide enough power for the optical drive. So we're going to keep the cable that it came with. That's what we're going to use. Open this up and we'll put our Windows 7 DVD in. And then I'm going to just set this on top of the computer. Now, most computers are flat on top. This one it has kind of a roof to it, a slanted cone head shape, if you will. So we'll have to figure out a way to keep this in position, because as the disk spins, the unit will start to vibrate. Now, before we install Windows 7, I want to talk a little bit about the USB ports. Because this computer has USB 3, Windows 7 was made before USB 3 was, so there's no support in Windows 7 for USB 3 until after you get the drivers installed. So what that means is, if you have a USB keyboard or a USB mouse,
You want to make sure you plug those into the USB 2 ports, or you won't be able to move the mouse and use the keyboard during Windows 7 setup. There is one exception. You see there's this limit on USB 3 currently. You can only have 4 USB 3.0 ports. This computer has 8. How did they do that? They gave you 4 ports through an Intel chip and 4 ports through a VIA chip. Now the Intel chip happens to work with USB 2.0 drivers that Windows 7 does have. What does that mean? It means you can go ahead and plug your keyboard, if it's USB, or your mouse, if it's USB, into 4 of the USB 3.0 ports that are from the Intel chipset. How do you know which 4 it is? Well, I've already done that testing for you. Let me just take this off here for a second, and let's turn this computer around. These top USB 3.0 ports and the USB 3.0 ports here in the middle are based on the VIA chipset. And what that means is when you go to install Windows 7, if you have a USB keyboard or mouse plugged into the top USB or the middle USB, Windows 7 installations will not see your keyboard or mouse. You must use either the very bottom USB 3.0 port or the USB 3.0 ports that are located on the very top of the computer. Looking at the top of the computer, the 2 USB ports closest to the front of the case are USB 2.0. These are USB 3.0. These are all Intel based, and you can use any of these 4 for your USB keyboard or mouse as well. Now before we attempt to install Windows 7, we only want to plug in the bare essentials to this computer. So I'm going to take my wireless mouse and I'll plug it in there, and my wireless keyboard, plug it in here. Again, I'm using the very bottom USB 3 ports that are on the Intel chipset that I just mentioned. We are not going to plug in the internet at this time. What's going to happen is, as you're installing your drivers, once it gets your network card driver installed, Windows will automatically start downloading new updates, and we don't want to start that process until we've got all our drivers done first. So for now, do not plug your computer into the internet. Grab your monitor cable next. I've got a DVI cable here. Remember, we're not using the onboard video. We've got our separate video card here. And I'm going to just go ahead and plug our monitor in. And of course, the last thing we save is power cord. So let's grab that, plug it into the power supply, and make sure the power supply switch is flipped in the on position. Now I've got my Windows 7 DVD in my external USB optical drive. In this case, it's Windows 7 Ultimate 64-bit. Because we have more than 4 gigs of RAM, we want to use the 64-bit version. We're just going to plug it into any of the 4 USB ports up here. It doesn't matter which of the 4 you use. And just kind of rest that up there where it's not going to fall. Now, one concern some of you may have is, how do we know which hard drive Windows 7 will install on? We want it to install on the smaller solid-state drive, not on the larger mechanical 3 terabyte drive. I'll show you how to select that very easily during the install. If you're afraid, if you think it's too complicated, you could always pull the side panel off and temporarily unplug the SATA connector from the mechanical drive so that the only drive you have is the solid-state drive. Then install Windows, because it'll only find one hard drive to install to. And once your Windows installation is done, you could turn the computer off and then plug the mechanical drive back in. But that's really unnecessary if you just follow along with me. I'll show you how easy it is to determine which drive is which during the installation process. Let's go ahead and start it now. Hit the power button. And we won't need to tell it to boot to USB. The computer will sense that there's no partitions, there's no bootable partitions on either of the hard drives. It'll automatically sense there's a USB that's bootable plugged into it, and even though the USB drive hasn't been specified as a boot device, it will automatically boot to it because it has no choice. There's no other device it can boot to. Now this drive will sort of vibrate around a little bit, so we're going to have to find a position for it where it's not going to fall off. With our Windows 7 installation starting, I'm going to just film a close-up of the screen here and show you what options I choose on this computer to install Windows 7. So as you can see, the first screen that comes up asks us what language, time and currency, keyboard input method. I just leave all this as is and click Next. and then I hit the Install Now. Next is the End User License Agreement. You have to accept the license terms and click Next. It asks if you want to do an upgrade or custom. I choose Custom. Here it shows our two installed hard drives. Disk 0, which is only 238.5 gigs, and Disk 1, which is 2,794.5 gigs. We know the smaller drive is the solid state drive. So just simply select that drive and then click Next. You do not have to worry about partitioning or formatting the drive. Windows 7 will take care of that automatically. At this point, you can sort of kick back and wait a while Windows copies the files it needs and then begins the Windows 7 installation. Once you reach this screen of your Windows setup, you just simply need to type your name in or your username. I'll just put my name in and then click Next. It wants a password. I'm not going to put a password on this computer. I'm just going to click Next. Of course, we have to enter a product key. On this screen about helping protect your computer and improve Windows automatically, I select Use Recommended Settings. I'm in Arizona, so I change my time zone to Arizona and make sure the date and time are correct. You'd be surprised just how many things don't work when something as simple as the date and time are wrong. So verify your date and time, you're in the right year, and then click Next. And then we get to our desktop. See, installing Windows 7 was no big deal, was it? The next step will be to install our drivers, and for that I'm going to use the driver disk that came with the motherboard and the video card. Well, we still have our optical drive conveniently plugged in. But before I begin to show you how to do that, I want to get you a better picture of the screen. So off camera, I'm going to go ahead and install the Camtasia recording software so I can capture the computer screen in perfect clarity, and you can see without a doubt and without question what options I'm selecting and how I'm going about installing the drivers. All right, now I've got the Camtasia software installed, and the next step will be to take the motherboard driver DVD and put that into our optical drive that we still have plugged into the USB port. So I'll do that now, and in just a moment the computer should try and attempt to run the auto run or ask us for permission to do that. And you'll see that screen here in just a moment. There it is. And right here we're going to select to run the run.exe. User account control comes up. Go ahead and click yes. Now if you've ever installed anything from Gigabyte before, you're probably used to their poor English, poor grammar, and misspellings. And of course that's no different here. Don't let that dissuade you though. I'll walk you through it. Right here under Express Install, it offers us the chance to install Google Chrome. I'll install Google Chrome, but not from the DVD. You see this is version 18. I think the current version is 22. We want to get the latest version. Google Toolbar, I definitely do not want that. Norton Internet Security, I'd rather have an enema than put that on my system. The Intel Management Engine software, that we want. The INF Update utility, yes, we want that. The Realtek HD audio driver, yes, we want that. The Realtek LAN driver, yes, we want that. The Intel Rapid Storage Technology driver, yes, we want that. The Intel USB 3.0 driver, yes. The VIA USB 3.0 driver, yes. On-off charge, that's a Gigabyte utility that lets you charge USB devices like smartphones through the USB port much faster. I don't use this utility, so I don't want it. It's up to you if you want it or not, and you'll have to read the instructions on how to use it, and perhaps I'll cover that in a later video and exactly what that is and how it works. Now up here it says install all. That's a little misleading because we don't want to install all. We only want to install the selected items. This goes back to Gigabyte's poor English. Go ahead and click install all. It will only install the items we selected. Now it says the installation will take about 14 minutes, but if you actually look at the clock, it won't take anywhere near 14 minutes. It might take around 4 minutes, I'm guessing. But at this point, you can just wait for this part to finish. Yeah, there it is. Time is 3:06. It only took 4 minutes, just as I predicted. Do you want to install Gigabyte utilities? Not at this time, so let's go ahead and click no. I'll make a separate video about the Gigabyte utilities. At this point, we're just about getting Windows 7 up and running, so click no on this. And it says install finish. I'm sure they meant to say finished. Please reboot your computer. So click OK, and then go ahead and click on start, and then the right arrow next to shutdown, and then restart. Now immediately when the computer reboots, it'll find some new hardware and it's going to want to restart again, so go ahead and let it. Click restart now. Next, we'll take our motherboard driver disk out and put in the video card driver disk and close the lid there on that optical drive, and in a moment that screen will come up. Here it'll ask you what you want to do. Go ahead and click to run setup.exe. User account control will ask for permission. Click yes. Now there's a bunch of items here to select from. There's install display driver, the Gigabyte overclocking guru, the manual, browse the CD and a README file. For right now, all we want to do is install the display driver, so click that. Now this first screen that comes up tells you what version of the driver you're installing. You might want to make a little note that you're installing, in this case we're installing 305.27, because later on when we go to update our drivers, we need to know what version we have versus what version is available to determine if a newer version is available. Besides that, on this screen is the end user license agreement. They expect you to read the following NVIDIA software license agreement carefully. Yeah, you go ahead and you do that. And then go ahead and, when you're done, click agree and continue. And you get the option of doing an express install or a custom install. We're going to do the express install and click next. If this Windows security dialog appears that the Windows can't verify the publisher or the driver, go ahead and click install this driver software anyway. It'll ask, Windows security might come up and ask if you would like to install the device software. I want to go ahead and click always trust software from NVIDIA and click install, just in case anything else from NVIDIA wants permission. I know I can trust NVIDIA. Now our driver installation for the video card is complete. Click restart now. Now that our video driver is installed, you can see our screen got a lot bigger. Now the next step is going to be to go ahead and take that driver disk out of the optical drive, and we can unplug the optical drive and put it away because we're done for it for forever as far as I'm concerned. The next step is to go ahead and plug the computer into your internet connection. And this screen will come up to ask you to set your network location, home, work, or public. This is a home network, so click Home Network. It asks what we want to share on this computer. I don't want to share anything on this computer, so I'm going to untick all these boxes and click Next. This is a password it generates for Windows Home Group. You might want to go ahead and make a note of that. I'll do another video later about Windows Home Group and how it works. For now, go ahead and click Finish. Now that we have the computer plugged into the internet, the next step is to activate Windows 7, unless it's already activated. How do we know? Well, simply go to the Start orb, and where it says Computer, right-click, go to Properties. And down at the bottom here, you'll see a section that says Windows Activation, and it says 3 days until automatic activation activate Windows now. Or if yours is activated, it'll say Windows is activated. So I'm going to go ahead and activate Windows now. Click the option to activate Windows Online now. And then just wait a moment while the product key is being verified. Now, if your Windows doesn't activate for any reason, Microsoft will give you a toll-free number from anywhere in the world. You can call them, and as long as you have a legal copy of Windows, and a legal product key, and you're installing it on the number of PCs that that product key is allowed on, like most product keys are only allowed to be installed on one computer. However, they do have some family 3-pack licenses, and there are other licenses available, but as long as you're following the rules and obeying the end-user license agreement, when you call Microsoft and explain the situation, they should give you a manual activation over the phone. Never had a problem with that in the past. I've had to call Microsoft to get activation lots and lots of times. I won't even begin to speculate how many hundreds of times I've done it, and they've always given it to me every time. Now, my activation was successful, as you can see here, and I'll click Close. And while I've been talking, Windows Update went ahead and automatically downloaded and installed updates in the background, and now it wants to restart without me doing anything. And this is primarily why I didn't want that internet connection plugged in while we were installing our drivers, because these 3 updates it installed might be drivers. And it'd be nothing worse than trying to install your video driver while Windows Update in the background is also trying to install your video driver at the same time. So that's why I recommend you wait until your drivers are installed first before you plug your computer into the internet. If you're curious what updates were installed, we can click View Update History, and it shows it installed a couple of security updates. Well, those are pending, which means when we restart the computer, you'll see the screen telling you that they're installing. And sure enough, it installed an updated NVIDIA graphics driver, which is apparently newer than the one that was on that driver disk. And then the Windows Update agent also installed. So again, if that NVIDIA graphics driver were to try to install while I was installing my NVIDIA graphics driver from the DVD, I don't know which version I would end up with. Anyway, we'll go ahead and click OK, and we'll go ahead and click Restart Now. Now that we've rebooted, I do have to make one configuration change before I continue to install Windows updates. I already know what's going to happen. These updates are going to take a while to install, and my computer's going to go to sleep, and then Camtasia is not going to be able to record the screen. So what I'm going to do is go over to my control panel by clicking on the Start orb and going to Control Panel. And then I'm going to go where it says Category, and I'm going to choose Large Icons. I like that particular view better. And where it says Power Options, click on that. And it says Show Additional Plans. We'll click there. See, we don't need balanced or power saver. We want high performance, so we'll click high performance. And I also need to still make a little change to this. You won't need to make this change, but I do. I click Change Plan Settings, and it says turn off the display after 15 minutes. I don't want to do that, as I mentioned, or Camtasia there won't be anything for Camtasia to record. So I'm going to set that to 2 hours and hit Save Changes. Normally, once you select high performance, there's no OK or Apply button. You just select it and then close the window, and it'll take effect immediately. Now let's go ahead and run Windows Update, and the way we do that is by clicking on Start, going back to our control panel, and the very last thing listed here is Windows Update. We select that. It shows there's 127 important updates selected, even though it's showing 129 are available. That's okay. We'll go ahead and install these updates. And you can see it's going to be 356.7 to 361.4 megs on this one round of updates. Let's go ahead and click Install Updates. You have to accept the license terms and hit Finish. And now we wait. As you can see from the clock down in the bottom right corner, that took quite a while to install, and that's just round one. So let's go ahead and hit Restart Now. Okay, now that we've rebooted, let's go back to Windows Update. We can click on the Start orb. We can either go back to Control Panel and run Windows Update that way, or we can go to All Programs, and you'll see Windows Update is an option listed right there. So we'll hit that, and that'll start our Windows Update program. Now here it shows there's still 2 more important updates available, but I'm going to go ahead and hit check for updates anyway, just to have it rescan the computer and make sure that the number of updates still waiting is accurate. You'll see that number changed to 7. Let's go ahead and grab these 7. Let's see. Yeah, you'll see Service Pack 1 is a big update. It could be anywhere from 80 megs to almost 900 megs to download. For some reason, it hasn't selected this update. I don't know why, but we're just going to leave it just the way Windows recommends. And click OK here, and let's go ahead and install these updates. Now with this round of updates completed, go ahead and hit Restart Now. Now that the computer is rebooted, we get this message that Windows 7 Service Pack 1 is now installed. So click Close, and we'll go back to Windows Update, clicking the Start orb, Programs, Windows Update. It says there's 1 important update available. I think there's probably going to be more than 1. Let's hit Check for Updates. You'll see that it changed to 17 important updates, 42 optionals. That's an awful lot of optional updates. Let's see why there's so many. We'll click on that. Well, I can see all these language packs because we've got the ultimate version. We get all these optional language packs. I don't want any of them. So what I can do is click on the first one, scroll down, hold down the Shift key on the keyboard and click on the last one, and everything will highlight in between. Then right-click anywhere on the blue and click Hide those updates. Now click OK, and you'll see it shows only 8 optional updates. Click back, and these are the 8 optionals. I'm going to go ahead and take all of those and click OK. Along with these 17, as you can see, one of the 17 is not selected. You'll see it says 16 important updates out of 17. I'm sure there's a reason for that, so we'll just leave it be and click Install Updates. Now with those updates completed, hit Restart Now. Now that we've rebooted, we need to go back to Windows Update again, so back to the Start orb, back to All Programs, click Windows Update. Alright, it's staying at 1 important update available. At this point, down here it says Get Updates for Other Microsoft Products. Find out more. Go ahead and click on that. And this is the first time we're using Internet Explorer 9. Go ahead and select Use Recommended Security and Compatibility Settings and click OK. And then you get this tab that opens that welcomes you to Internet Explorer 9. I'm going to close that tab. This tells us about Microsoft Update, that this will get you updates for not just Windows but for Office and other Microsoft software. So go ahead and agree to the terms of use and click Install. User account control will come up. Go ahead and click Yes to allow it permission. And then we can go ahead and close this window. And Windows Update, which is now Microsoft Update, will scan again for updates to not just Windows, but to other Microsoft software that could be updated or added to this Windows 7 installation. If you're not sure if you're getting Windows updates or Microsoft updates, just look at this bottom line when you go to Windows Update, and it says you receive updates for Windows and other products from Microsoft Update. If it just says for Windows, then you don't have Microsoft Update. Now it's still showing 1 important update is available, so let's go ahead and grab that update and click Install. Now this update is for Microsoft .NET Framework 4, and there's going to be a lot of updates to this update, and this update does take a little while to install, and it has to be installed on its own. That's why it was only offering us this 1 update, and that's why it was previously unchecked, because this has to be installed all by itself. So let's go ahead and let this download and install. Now with this update, we don't have to reboot the computer, so we can go ahead and go back to check for updates again. And you see now we've got 10 important updates and 3 optionals. Let's take a look at what those optional updates are. Microsoft Silverlight, yeah, we can grab that. Security Essentials, I definitely want that. It's a great free antivirus. I strongly recommend that. The Bing Desktop, I do not want, so I'm going to right-click and choose Hide Update. Click OK, and I'm going to click Install Updates. Here we've got to agree to the license terms for Microsoft Silverlight. Click Finish. This screen appears to install Microsoft Security Essentials. We'll go ahead and click Next. Agree to the end user license agreement by clicking I accept. I don't want to join the customer improvement program. You certainly can if you want to. Click Next. If no firewall's turned on, turn on the Windows firewall. Yes, definitely want to keep that checked and hit Next. Now here it warns you that you don't want to have any other antivirus running. It's okay if you have a program like Malwarebytes or Super Anti-Spyware, but you don't want two antivirus programs running. So it just warns you to uninstall any antivirus you may have already before you install this antivirus. Because this is a new install, we obviously don't have any antivirus installed, so there won't be any conflict. We can go ahead and click Install. And then we'll keep this box checked that says to scan my computer for potential threats after getting the latest updates and hit Finish. Now let's go ahead and wait for Security Essentials to download the latest virus and spyware definitions and then perform a quick scan of the hard drive. Now with our virus scan updated and completed, let's go ahead and close that window. And let's go back and check for updates again. It does show one important update is available, and just an update for Windows 7. Doesn't really tell us what it is or what it does, but that's all right. We'll grab it, click OK, and we'll click Install. With this update completed, now we have to restart the computer, so go ahead and click Restart Now. And now that we've rebooted, guess what we're going to do? We're going to go back to Windows Updates. So back to the Start orb, back to All Programs, click on Windows Update, and we'll click Check for Updates. That's perfect. Now there's no more updates available for our computer. Hallelujah. That part of the install is done. At this point, we can close this window. Now the next thing I like to do is just change a little of the look and feel of Windows 7 to my particular preferences. Kind of like adjusting the seat and mirror in a car. You don't have to agree to my preferences, and you don't have to follow these changes. But just to show you what I do, one of the things Windows likes to do is hide a lot of things, and I don't like anything hidden from me. That really bugs me. So like down here on the system tray, where we see running applications, we only see some of the running applications. So I'll just click on that, click Customize, and check this little box that says Always Show All Icons and Notifications on the taskbar. Click OK. To me, that's a really important one. Another thing is I like the computer icon on the desktop. So to get that back, I just right-click any empty area of the desktop, go to Personalize, and click where it says Change Desktop Icons. Put a check next to where it says Computer, and click OK. We close that out. And I like these to be alphabetized, so I right-click again and choose Sort by Name. And what it does is it alternates between sorting by A to Z and sorting by Z to A. So it just sorted Z to A, so nothing appeared to change. We do it again, right-click, Sort by Name, and now it just sorted A to Z with computer being starting with C, it goes on top, right? Another thing I don't like is now when I click the computer icon, I don't get File, View, Tools, Help. I don't get that whole menu toolbar. To get that back, if I hit F10 on the keyboard, you'll see it comes back. And if I want to keep it always there, click on Tools, click on Folder Options, click on the View tab, and click Always Show Menus. And while we're here, I don't like that Windows hides file extensions of known file types. I don't know whose brilliant idea this was, but now if somebody sends you an email attachment, you have no way of knowing if it's a doc file or an executable file because, you know, it could be a virus, who knows. So I always uncheck the box that says hide extensions for known file types. I think that's pretty important. I click OK, and I can close that window. Another thing I don't like is when we bring up Internet Explorer, it also doesn't give us the file, help, view. You don't see any of that. But if we go up right up in this area and right click, we can choose menu bar. And that should keep that displayed every time now. So I can close this, reopen it, and you'll see file, edit, view, favorites, that's all there now. Again, that's a personal preference of mine. While we're in Internet Explorer, we can go ahead and change our home page if you want to. I like Google to be my home page, so I'll just type www.google.com. You can choose whatever home page you want. Just go ahead and go there, and then once you're there, click on Tools, click Internet Options. Right here it says Use Current. Go ahead and click that. And then the other thing is, when you look at the browsing history, we click Settings, and it's at 250 megs of internet cache. In my opinion, that's way too much. And if you have Windows XP, you may see this number be a 4-digit number. That's into the gigs of internet cache. And when you have high-speed internet, you almost don't need a cache at all. So all I'm going to do is take that 0 off the end. 25 megs, in my opinion, is more than enough. And as far as the history goes, I don't like 20 days of URL history. I cut that down to 10. Again, these are my own personal preferences. As far as internet cache goes, I think this should be any 2-digit number. If you see a 3-digit or 4-digit number, or even a 5-digit number on your computer, in my opinion, that's all wasted hard drive space that you could be using for something you actually want to store on your hard drive, let alone the privacy concerns. We're done here. We'll go ahead and click OK. Now up here at this tab, you'll see it says Connections. And down here, you'll see there's a button that says LAN Settings. Now for most people, we'll go ahead and click this LAN Settings. For most people, you just have a direct DSL or cable internet connection, and you don't need to select automatic configuration. You can actually turn off automatically detect settings. This will get rid of the slight delay that happens the first time you bring up your browser, or at least the first time you bring up Internet Explorer. And most people aren't using a proxy. If you are using a proxy, then of course just leave all that alone. And if you don't know what a proxy is, even more importantly, leave it alone. But for most of you out there, just leaving all these boxes unticked will help speed up Internet Explorer. And then go ahead and click OK, and then we can close this window. So let's bring up Internet Explorer and make sure our change is stuck. Yep, it took us to Google just like we told it to as our default home page. Another change I make is to the default search provider. So if we click on this little gear up here and go to Manage Add-ons, and when this window comes up, click where it says Search Providers, and then it says Find More Search Providers down here. Click on that. A new browser window will open. If we scroll down here, select Most Popular, and the very first one on the left will be Google. Click once on that, and then click Add to Internet Explorer, and check the box to make it my default search provider. Of course, you can do this with any search provider you want. I like Google. Click the Add button. I can close that browser window, close this window, and then go back to the gear, back to Manage Add-ons, back to Search Providers. Now I can right-click on Bing and choose Remove. You'll see Google is the default. And I also check this little box right down here that says Prevent Programs from Suggesting Changes to my default search provider, and click Close. Another thing I like to do is add Flash. So if we just type Get Flash, first thing that appears is the adobe.com Flash Player link. So we'll click that. You got to be careful when you go to download anything from Adobe that's free, like Flash or Acrobat Reader. They like to add on things to the download, so I don't want to add Chrome. Like I said, if I want to get Chrome, I'll get it individually. So I untick that box and then click Download Now. And then we'll just go ahead and click Run. User account control comes up. Click Yes. The Update Flash Player Preferences window comes up. I always allow Adobe to install updates because Flash can be a really big security problem. It's always being updated, and those updates are really important. So when they're available, I want them to install right away. So I leave that at the default, which is to install updates automatically, and then click Next. Now that the Adobe Flash Player is finished installing, click Finish, and a new browser will open and you'll see this dancing box. That wouldn't work if Flash wasn't installed properly. So that's how you know Flash was installed correctly. Go ahead and close that browser window. The next thing I want to install is Java. Again, these are my preferences. You may disagree or have other ideas. When I give a computer back to a customer, a lot of customers do things on the web that require Java, and it gives me a support call. So what I'll do is I'll install the basics for the customer to avoid getting that support call. So we'll just go right up here and we'll go to java.com and click Free Java Download and click Agree and Start Free Download. And again, we'll click Run down here when it appears. User account control will come up. Go ahead and click Yes. Our installation screen appears. Click Install. Here it's going to try and install the Ask toolbar and make Ask my default search provider. We do not want that. I untick that box. All I'm getting is Java. Nothing more, nothing less. Click Next. Now that the installation's finished, we'll click Close. And down here it says the web page wants to run the following add-on. It's Java. We're going to click Allow. Now that the Java install is complete, we want to close the browser and then restart it. Let's go back to Java again. Now this notice appears down on the bottom of the browser that says the Java SSV helper add-on wants to run. Let's go ahead and give it permission and enable that. Then click here, it says Do I have Java? And here we can verify that Java is installed correctly by clicking Verify Java Version. And it does verify that we have the latest version installed. It's really important that you make sure that you always have the latest version of Java installed at all times. It's a common way that hackers like to exploit to get into your computer, so they're always patching it and adding security fixes to it. But every 3 to 6 weeks you might check and make sure that you have the latest version if you don't automatically get the notice that new versions are available. Now this next download some of you aren't going to like, but stay with me because there's a reason I'm going to do this, and that's Adobe Reader. Now, Adobe Reader is a free PDF reader, and you can see in Google I just typed Adobe Reader and the website comes up to get that here. So we'll click on that link, and like the other Adobe product, it tries to install another product along with their free product. I'm going to go ahead and uncheck that box. This is a new Adobe Reader 11 that just came out, and I realize there are a lot of alternatives to Adobe Reader. However, when I build a system for just a regular client, home user or business user, I always make sure they've got the free PDF reader installed to ensure they're able to open the PDFs that their clients and friends send them. Otherwise, I get a support call. So this is something I generally do to all computers. On a gaming computer, this probably isn't something you're going to want. But that said, let's go ahead and download and install it because I want to show you what happens. This box comes up, go ahead and click Run. And user account control comes up, click Yes. Here it shows Adobe Reader. You want to install updates automatically. Again, if you're going to install Adobe Reader, PDF files are another way hackers like to exploit to get into vulnerabilities in there to get control of your computer. Always important to make sure you have the latest version of Adobe Reader if you're going to use it. So I like to make sure that Install Updates Automatically is checked and click Next. When the installation completes, click Finish. And then of course you'll get a website that appears that says your installation was successful, and again, it wants your permission to activate or enable this Adobe PDF Link Helper. It's an add-on for the browser. Go ahead and click Enable. That way, if you click on a PDF file within the browser, it'll open automatically. Again, that prevents, you guessed it, a support call from the customer. So I do all this for the customer. I want to close these browser windows out. And if we want to bring up Adobe Reader, we can bring that up. And the very first time it comes up, you've got to agree to the license agreement by clicking Accept. And then you can use it as normal. So let's go ahead and close that. And the reason I installed it primarily was to show you what happens with Internet Explorer when you have a lot of add-ons installed. Now, if you ever start Internet Explorer and you see this performance monitor come up that says you can speed up browsing by disabling add-ons, you can make this go away. You don't have to disable any add-ons. If you click Choose Add-ons, right down here at the bottom it says tell me when the delay caused by add-on exceeds, and you'll see the default is set to a ridiculous 0.2 of a second. What I usually do to disable this performance monitor is just use this drop-down box and go all the way down to 10 seconds. Obviously, if my Internet Explorer takes 10 seconds to open, something's wrong. And then click Done, and that message will probably go away forever. Now, you don't have to use Internet Explorer. Of course, you could use Google Chrome or Firefox or Opera or Safari or whatever browser you want to use, but I'm just showing you how I configure Internet Explorer 9. So we can go ahead and close that now. One other personal preference change that I make is the option to highlight newly installed programs on the Start menu. All the programs on the Start menu are going to be alphabetized automatically. I don't need new programs to be highlighted. I find it an unnecessary distraction. So what I can do to change that is right-click on the taskbar, go to Properties. Up here, hit the Start menu tab and hit Customize. And you'll see this is all alphabetized, and we go down to the H's and uncheck Highlight Newly Installed Programs, click OK, and click OK. So when it comes to Windows 7 optimizations, there's this great forum over at overclock.net. And to find it, I'm just going to go to Internet Explorer and type in Windows 7 SSD optimization. I don't even have to finish spelling it. And this first link that appears is what we want, Sean's Windows 7 Install and Optimization Guide for SSDs and HDDs. Let's go ahead and click on that. Now this link is down in the video notes down below, so you don't have to search for it. I'll just give you the link directly. And as we scroll down here, he's created this guide of what he does to configure the install and what he does to optimize Windows after the install. So you might want to read through all of this. There's some great information here. Everything from making a custom Windows 7 ISO image to making a bootable USB installer. Talks about prepping the system for the install, and of course we're past all of this. And there's these three links right here: System Setup After Install, Optimizations After System Setup, and System Maintenance. So the first one here is System Setup After Installation. Let's go ahead and click this. We have to click that to show it. It opens up and you'll see the first tip he suggests is to turn off or shrink the hibernation file. I don't use hibernation mode on a desktop. It doesn't make any sense to use it. So we'll follow his steps here. He says open the Start menu. In the search line, type CMD, and then right-click CMD that appears and choose Run as Administrator. So let's do that. Go down to the Start orb. We'll type CMD, and the program that appears right here, we right-click, choose Run as Administrator. User account control asks us if we're sure. We click Yes. Let's move this down, and we can see here it says type POWER CFG -H off, and then press Enter. Now that deletes the hibernation file. The other command here shrinks it. I recommend just turning it off, unless it's a laptop. As we scroll down, you can disable or shrink system protection. So right now we can go ahead and close the DOS window we had opened. We'll just type Exit and hit Enter. And to do this, it says to open the Start menu, right-click Computer, go to Properties. Let me just move this aside here. One of the advantages of having the computer icon on the desktop is we don't have to go to the Start menu to get to it. So we can right-click, go to Properties. Let me just move this down so we can still read the directions. It says click on System Protection, which is right here on the left side. Let me move it down again. Then it says select C, that's right here, and then click the Configure button right here. And here we can adjust how much space we want system protection to use. So I'm going to go ahead and just choose 1%. That's still over 2 gigs of space. and click OK. Now, of course, it'll say some of our older restore points will be deleted. Are you sure? Yes. And then click OK. And now we can close this out. Now, what's nice is he's got his own video tutorials right here on the site for each one of these tweaks. Now, you can turn off drive indexing. Now, this applies to solid-state drives only. And the way you can do that is just double-click on Computer, right-click on the C drive, go to Properties, and untick this box that says Allow files on this drive to have contents indexed in addition to file properties, and click OK. And of course, we want to make sure to apply changes to the C drive, subfolders, and files, and click OK. Of course, it says we need administrator privileges, so go ahead and click Continue. And here I would just choose Ignore All, and this will just take a moment. Now, once that's complete, we can go ahead and close this window and go back to the website, go to the next step. Now, here it talks about turning off or shrinking the paging file. And there's a lot of debate about this. My personal experience is if you have more than 4 gigs of RAM, you really don't need your swap file. And the problem is if you have the swap file or the paging file, the programs will use it if you've got it. And it's slower than using RAM. So by not having it, it forces it to use the RAM, which makes the computer faster. So how do you disable your swap file or your paging file? Well, simply go to the computer icon here, right-click, go to Properties. Go to Advanced System Settings here on the left. And under Performance, click Settings. Then under the Advanced tab, where it says Virtual Memory, don't you like how they give it 3 names, virtual memory, paging file, swap file? Anyway, go ahead and click Change. And it says automatically manage paging file size for all drives. You want to uncheck that. And then click No Paging File. And then this is the only place in Windows you'll see this Set button. You must press the Set button for these changes to take effect. You'll get a warning that if you disable the paging file or set the initial size to less than 400 megabytes and a system error occurs, Windows might not record the details that could help identify the problem. Do you want to continue? Yes, I do. And then I click OK, and click OK, and click OK, and I can close this window. We go back to the website, and as we scroll down, it suggests that now we shut down for the first time. This applies all the changes we've made, and you should now have a bunch of free space. And if we have any secondary drives, we go ahead and plug those in now. And you'll see he installs his drivers, and then he installs Windows Update that we've already done, changes the power options that we've already done, and then runs the Windows Experience Index Assessment, and then shows how to check the defragmentation schedule to verify it's disabled so that your solid-state drive is working properly. So before we get to that, let's just go ahead and close the browser, and let's restart Windows now. All right, now that we've rebooted, let's go ahead and see what our Windows Experience Index looks like. To do that, we just go right over to the computer icon, right-click, and go to Properties. And you'll see right here our rating is 7.6 for our Windows Experience Index. But we can actually go ahead and click Windows Experience Index to see the details of that score. And then if we want, we can go ahead and rerun the assessment by clicking right down here in the bottom corner. Okay, after rerunning the assessment, nothing's changed here. But, you know, in your case, you may not even have had an assessment run yet. And if you're curious how that's done or if any of the changes that you make affect it, that's how you run that. Well, let's go back to the website and continue where we left off with the optimizations. We'll close this window. We'll bring up Internet Explorer again. And I favorited it so I don't have to find it again. So we'll just go right here to Sean's Windows 7 Install and Optimization Guide here. And let's scroll down to where we were. We were at System Setup After Installation, so I'll click to show. We'll scroll down to where we left off, is running the Windows Experience Index Assessment. The next thing is to check the defragmentation schedule. Defragmenting a solid-state drive will do nothing to benefit you, and because solid-state drives have a limited number of times they can be written to, all you're going to do is reduce the life of that solid-state drive. So I can't stress enough, never defragment a solid state drive or a USB flash memory stick or a memory card. So to open the disk defragmenter, what we're going to do is click on our start orb. And right here, just type in disk defragment. And you'll see it appears right there. We'll click on it. And you'll see here on C it says never run. And click right here where it says configure schedule. And then click select disks. And you do not want to see the C drive listed here. So right now it says select all disks. No drive is listed. That's good. If you see the C drive listed, there'll be a little checkbox next to it. Uncheck it. So obviously Windows knows this is a solid state drive and it's disabled defragmentation for this drive automatically. We were just verifying that. That's good. So we can hit cancel and close. Continuing on with the optimization guide. Of course, it recommends installing virus protection and apps. Windows Update should install Microsoft Security Essentials for you. Again, I recommend Microsoft Security Essentials for antivirus, but it's not enough to protect you on its own. I recommend getting Malwarebytes. He also recommends it. You can get the free version or the paid version. The free version will only help you to clean up infections, whereas the paid version will prevent the infections. Now, no antivirus or anti-malware product can protect you from yourself 100% any more than buying a safe car can prevent you from getting into a car accident. So the trick is, don't worry about how safe your car is. Become a better driver. With that said, let's go ahead and grab Malwarebytes right now. So I'm going to open another tab up here, and we're going to go to Malwarebytes.org. And here you can hit the free download button. You know, one of the things I really like about Malwarebytes is, unlike other system security software, when you buy a license for Malwarebytes, you buy it for life. You pay for it once, and it's good for the life of that specific computer. They're not always billing you every year, which end users, a lot of typical end users ignore it, and they put it off thinking they're still protected because the software is still running when they aren't. So kudos to Malwarebytes for offering a lifetime license. And it's even cheaper than most annual license fees for other PC security software. Anyway, let's go ahead and click the Download Now button. And we'll click Run. User account control comes up. We'll give it permission by clicking Yes. Here we select our setup language, which is English. We get our welcome screen. Click Next. Accept the end user license agreement. Click Next. Here we click Next again. Click Next again. Click Next again. Create a desktop icon if we want. Click Next again, and click Install. There were no toolbars you have to uncheck or anything. It's a nice clean install. And you'll see by default they'll give you a free trial of Malwarebytes for, I believe it's 15 days, where it gives you the full version that protects you and prevents infections, most infections, from getting on your system to begin with. If you don't pay for it within those 15 days, it defaults back to the free version. It's also important to note that the paid version will also automatically update itself, whereas with the free version, you have to update it manually every time you go to run it. Anyway, let's go ahead and click Finish, and it's going to go ahead and start Malwarebytes, and it will update it. Tells us our database was updated. We click OK. And then the program's installed. You'll see we're in trial mode. And for now, I'm just going to go ahead and hit Exit. But you'll see down in the system tray the red M, square M down here. And that lets us know that Malwarebytes is actively running. Again, that's what the paid version does. And because we're in the free trial mode, we're getting all the benefits of the paid version during the trial. Let's go ahead and close this tab and go back to the Install and Optimization Guide. And that finishes part 1 of the optimizations after setup. Step 2 now is optimizations after system setup. We'll click to show. Now, if you've got a small solid-state drive and you want to move your user folder to your secondary hard drive, these steps walk you through that process. I'm not going to do that. The solid state drive is plenty big for our purposes. You can disable any unneeded services. I won't get into this because in most cases that'll come back to bite you on the butt. So if you want to do that, there's a great site here from Black Viper that tells you what the services are, which ones you need, which ones you can disable when you want to get the most performance when you're gaming. You can disable your graphical user interface on boot. They claim it speeds up the boot a second or two, and you won't see the boot splash screen. Some people debate it makes no difference at all. I'm not going to do that. You can disable the annoying user account control. And to do that, we just click on the start orb and type UAC and press enter. Just drag this slider down to never notify. Click OK. And then user account control will come up one last time to ask for permission. Click yes. Now we do get an alert down on the bottom right corner here that says you have to restart the computer for the turning off user account control to take effect. Another step they recommend is to turn off unused Windows 7 features. To do this, we need to go to our control panel, which is back to the start orb, and then control panel. And then we go to programs and features. And here on the left it says turn Windows features on or off. Click that once. And you can select from this list of items things you want to remove from Windows or disable from Windows. For example, I don't like the built-in games, the solitaire and hearts and stuff. I can uncheck that and remove those games. And if this is a little over your head and you feel a little uncertain about what things are safe to remove or not, you don't have to do this. You can just go ahead and leave this part alone. I'm going to go ahead and remove those games since I unchecked it. It just takes a second for that to remove. It frees up a little hard drive space, not much. Go ahead and close out the control panel now. And now we have to restart the computer for these changes to take effect, but I'm not going to do that just yet. We'll continue on with these optimizations. Here it says to enable write-back caching and turn off Windows write caching buffer flushing on the C drive. Intel users, that's us, read this. Turning off buffer flushing on a hard disk drive is moderately risky, and on a normal solid-state drive, it's low risk. Much faster random writes get data off the cache onto the NAND fast. And on enterprise solid-state drives, it's virtually no risk. So how do we do that? We're going to go to the Start menu and type Disk Management. So we go right down here and type Disk Management and press Enter. On the C drive, we right-click, go to Properties, go to the Hardware tab, make sure we select the solid-state drive, which is the one that's already selected, and click Properties. Now we go to the Policies tab and make sure that Enable Write Caching on the device is checked. It should be checked by default. And then check this box right below it that says Turn off Windows Write Cache Buffer Flushing on the device. Click OK. Click OK. We can close that window. Now, the next step, they recommend disabling prefetch and superfetch. The purpose of these are to preload the programs that you load from a slow hard drive to fast memory in case you want to run them. Now, with your solid-state drive, there's no need. Disable them and free up some memory and resources and stop a lot of writes to the solid-state drive. However, this may hurt performance in older first-generation solid-state hard drives and hard disk drives. To do this, we go back to our Start menu, type Services, .msc and press Enter. This is all alphabetized, and we scroll down until we see Superfetch, which is right there. Double click on it, and we'll select it to Disabled and click OK. If yours is started, like here you'll see it says Disabled. If we double click on that again, if yours is started, you may have to hit the Stop button first before you can disable it. So let's go ahead and click OK here, close this out. Next, it recommends we go into the registry. Now, I don't take going into the registry lightly. However, if you follow these steps exactly, you should have nothing to fear. So next, they recommend going to the Start menu again and type regedit and press Enter. Go to H key local machine, just hit this little arrow here. Then system, the little arrow here. And then current control set, a little arrow there. We call this drilling down. You see how we're going to folder within folder within folder. And then under control, let's move this over a little bit so we can read. This is all alphabetized. We go to Session Manager, which is right here. We'll hit that arrow. Under Memory Management, we hit that arrow. Click on Prefetch Parameters. Where it says Enable Prefetcher, we'll double click on that and change this number to a 0. The default is 3. Click OK. Where it says Enable Superfetch, double click on that. Change that 3 to a 0. Click OK. 3, of course, is the default value on both of those. And then we can close the registry editor. The next thing we can do is speed up our shutdown time. That requires us to go back into the registry editor. So again, back to the start orb, type regedit, press enter. And if you'll see, it takes you back where you left off, and if you want to reset that, just hit your left arrow time and time again, and it'll eventually take you right back just like that. And if your left arrow takes you all the way back to that, we'll just hit that one arrow right there. So here we go to H key local machine, the arrow next to system, the arrow next to current control set, and then we're going to click right where it says control, right on that. And if you can't see all of the writing here, you can go right up to where the divider is, and you'll see the cursor changes to a left and right arrow, and we can drag that over so we can read everything. And the one we're interested in is its wait to kill service timeout. And if we double click on that, this is set to like milliseconds. So 12,000 milliseconds is 12 seconds. We can change that to 1,000 milliseconds, which is 1 second, and click OK. So with that done, we can go ahead and close the registry again. And the next few tweaks I don't personally do. They're up to you if you want to do them. The next one is about speeding up the menu show delay time, which is, again, a registry tweak. Change the mouse hover time before the pop-up displays. I'm not going to change that. Disable unwanted visual effects. I'm not going to disable that. This computer is really fast. This may make a difference if you have a really old, slower computer to get some of the performance back on the desktop. Now that finishes all our Windows 7 optimizations, so we can go ahead and close this website down, close the browser. Now the next thing we can do is make sure that the trim command is enabled on our solid state drive. Now if you don't know what the trim command is or does, don't worry about that right now. I will cover that in another video all about solid state drives. For now, we want to make sure, it's important, that Windows 7 has detected our solid state drive and has enabled the trim command. So how do you do that? Well, to verify the trim command is turned on and enabled in Windows 7, click on the start orb, and here in the search window just type cmd, and what appears right up here, the cmd.exe, right click on that and choose Run as Administrator. Now when you get to this prompt, type in fsutil space behavior space query space disable delete notify and press enter. It came back as 0. Now 0 means trim is enabled, and that's what we wanted to see. If it came back as 1, then that means trim has not been enabled. Now if you're running a solid state drive and the command came back with the result of 1 instead of 0, it's very easy to enable the trim command in Windows 7. Simply type fsutil space behavior space set disable delete notify space 0 and press enter, and that will enable the trim command in Windows 7. Now we're done with this window, so we can just type exit EXIT and press enter to return to our desktop. Now the next thing I'd like to do is update the firmware on my solid state drive. A lot of the manufacturers of solid state drives update their firmware quite frequently, and most of the time the manufacturers will tell you not to update the firmware unless it's absolutely necessary. But I like to have the latest firmware. I don't know what it fixes, but ideally, if you were to order a new solid state drive, it would come with a newer firmware than the solid state drive you ordered a couple of months ago. the reason manufacturers only tell you to do it if it's necessary is there is a chance you could lose all the data on the drive, or if there's a power failure during the upgrade process, the drive could become unusable. So as long as you're plugged into an UPS, an uninterruptible power supply, or you just have a good feeling you're not going to lose power, the worst that could happen is you could lose your data. Now, I've never had an issue with losing data. However, now that we've got Windows 7 already installed and configured and optimized the way we want it to be, this is a good time to make a system image of that hard drive. Take an entire picture of that hard drive. And you don't have to buy or install any more software to do that. Windows 7 has system imaging software built right into it. All you have to do is get a USB drive that's at least large enough to hold the amount of data that you've got. So I've got a 1 terabyte USB drive. Let me plug it in. Now once Windows detects your USB drive has been plugged in, this autoplay window appears. And here you have the option of opening the folder to view files, or to use this drive for backup. Let's click Use this drive for backup. The next window that comes up defaults to letting Windows choose the backup method, and this is what I recommend. What this will do is, as it explains, Windows will back up data files saved in libraries, on the desktop, and in default Windows folders. Windows will also create a system image, which can be used to restore your computer if it stops working. These items will be backed up in a regular schedule as long as you leave the USB drive plugged in. Further along, there's the option of making an emergency rescue disk. So if, for example, your hard drive should fail or you lose all your data, you'll be able to boot to the rescue disk with your USB drive plugged in and restore the hard drive exactly the way it was. Your full operating system, all your programs, all your custom configurations. It's an exact picture of your hard drive on the day you made that backup. So I strongly recommend this. Let's go ahead and click Next. And here's our backup location. We've got a 1 terabyte USB drive. We'll back up all users. It says that a system repair disk might be required to restore the image. You can click More Information, and that'll show you how to create that emergency boot image or that emergency boot disk. Now by default, it's going to want to create it into a CD or a DVD. You can convert that to boot from USB. I won't get into any of that for right now. Let's go ahead and close this window, and we'll click Save Settings and Run Backup. Now here you'll see the backups in progress, and once we've got the backup completed, then we can go ahead and update the firmware on our solid state drive without worrying about any data loss. In a worst case scenario, if for some reason the whole hard drive got wiped out and reset during the firmware update or as a result of the firmware update, we could simply boot to the rescue disk and restore our image. Again, in my experience, I've updated firmware several times on many solid state drives, and I've never once lost any data as a result. However, you should always have a backup anyway, and I'll do a video in more depth about backups and different types of backups later on in this series. The View Details button here is almost useless. When you click on it, it just kind of gives you a percentage of how far along the backup is. It doesn't really give you that much more information. And of course, if you needed to stop the backup, you could do that here. I'll just go ahead and close this and keep it out of the way. Now with our backup completed, I can go ahead and close this window and then disconnect my backup drive. Now to determine if a new firmware version is available for our solid state drive, we need to go to the solid state drive manufacturer's website. Now in our case, we have a Crucial M4 solid state drive. So we'll bring up Internet Explorer and we'll go to crucial.com. Over here it says Support, so we'll click there. And here you'll see Solid State Support. And located at the bottom it says Firmware Updates, so we click on that. Here it asks us to choose our product. We have the Crucial M4 2.5-inch solid state drive. And here it shows us the current version is 010G. So how do we know what version we have? Well, to determine our version, we can go to our start orb, go to the computer icon, and right-click on our C drive, which is our solid-state drive. Go to Properties. Next, click the Hardware tab. We'll select our solid-state drive again, which is already selected, and click Properties. Next, click the Details tab, and under Property, use this drop-down box, select Hardware IDs, and you'll see that our M4 has a firmware version of 000F. So that's the version we have. And as a reminder, the version that's available is 010G. And there is a note that says here that firmware for the crucial M4 2.5-inch solid-state disk is being updated from version 000F to 010G. Great, so let's go ahead and close all those windows we just opened up. So we'll just hit cancel on all of this and close this window. We'll go back to the website, and for Windows 7 and Windows 8, to get the updater, click Download Firmware and click Save. Now that the save is completed, we'll click Open. And this is our file here. We can stretch this out a little bit to see the full name. We'll double click to start that. At this point, we can go ahead and close the website behind us. And we'll click Run. Now here it says this program will update the firmware on your crucial solid-state drive. Now before proceeding, make sure your system is plugged into a reliable power supply, which we previously discussed. Make a backup of your data and close all open applications. Again, all this we previously discussed. The update process will require a restart to complete, and when the computer restarts, the drive will update and then load Windows normally. You must accept the license agreement in order to use this program. So here we'll click License, click Accept, assuming you've read it and accept it, and click Continue. Now the computer is shut down, restarted, and the update process completed in what appeared to be a text mode. I wasn't able to capture that on film because the Camtasia software only works inside of Windows. Now that the computer's restarted the first time, it detects the hard drive as though it's a new hard drive all over again, even though it's not a new hard drive, because the firmware's been changed. As far as Windows is concerned, it's a new hard drive. So for the changes to take effect for loading the drivers for that new hard drive, we have to restart Windows one more time. Now if you want to verify you've got that latest firmware now that we've restarted, we'll just double click on Computer, right click on the C drive, which is our solid state drive, back to Properties, back to the Hardware tab, making sure that the solid state drive is selected, click Properties, click Details, and choose Hardware IDs, and now we see 010G, which is the latest firmware. It's that easy. Let's go ahead and hit Cancel, Cancel, and Close. Now the last thing we have to do is to partition and format that big 3 terabyte mechanical drive. Just go to your Start Orb and to the Control Panel and click Administrative Tools. Under Computer Management, we'll double click, and then we'll go to Disk Management right here on the left. Just one click is all that takes. And then you'll see Disk 0 has already got partitions and has been formatted, and Disk 1 is unallocated. So what you can do is right click and choose New Simple Volume, then click Next, and you can pretty much leave everything at defaults. Click Next, assign the following drive letter, drive D, that's fine, we'll click Next. And then we can format it in NTFS, that's fine, we can give it a volume label. You can choose any volume label you like. I'm going to just put 3 terabyte, just like that. And we're going to perform a quick format. If we don't do a quick format, this thing will take probably, I don't know, an hour and a half or 2 hours to do a regular format. So quick format's all we need to do. Hit Next. And it says you've successfully completed the new Simple Volume Wizard. And this is what you've selected to do. This is Summary. And we'll click Finish, and it'll do that right now. You'll see it's formatting, and this format is going to be very quick. It's already done. We can close this window, and we can close the Control Panel, Windows, And now it says, hey, I found a new hard drive, 3 terabyte drive D. Open folder to view files. And you'll see there's our big 3 terabyte drive, completely empty. If I close that window, go to the computer icon, double click it, you'll see now we've got the C drive and the D drive. And you'll see on the C drive, if we right click and go to properties, the blue is the space we're using right now. It's just about 25 gigs, which means the vast majority of this solid state drive is still available. Lots of space, well over 200 gigs are still available to use for programs, games, whatever you want. And then if you've got, big files, if you've got movies or, big collection of music, something like that, large picture collection, cancel that. You go right over to your 3 terabyte drive and use that. If we right click and go to properties, as you can see, we're not using any of it. We've got 3 terabytes available to us, and it's good to go. We'll hit cancel here, close that window, and that's it. Now your Windows 7 setup, configuration, and optimization is done. Now you can put whatever programs you want or whatever games you want on it and start using it and enjoy it.